letter purporting to end a constitutional right that has been protected and long recognized for over a century by every branch of government epitomizes that approach to law.
The Supreme Court is expected to decide by summer. Representatives of Ukraine and Russia are in Turkey. They're supposed to hold the first direct talks since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports the Kremlin says Russian President Putin won't attend the talks.
Putin had suggested direct talks, and at one point, President Trump said he might join too. But only one leader, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, is in Turkey today. He spoke to reporters in Ankara after learning the Kremlin was sending technocrats to the talks. Zelensky explained what he's considering before sending his own delegation. Zelensky said, "We need to understand the level of the Russian delegation, what their mandate is, and whether they are capable of making any decisions on their own, because we all decisions in Russia," he said, referring to Putin. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also in Turkey and could attend talks in Istanbul. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has proposed rolling back state health insurance benefits for adult immigrants who do not have legal status. Cap Radio's Laura Fitzgerald reports the shift comes as California faces a $12 billion deficit.
In 2024, California began allowing adult immigrants without legal status to enroll in Medi-Cal, the state's Medicaid program. But more people signed up for benefits than expected, and with the state facing a budget shortfall, Newsom is now proposing the state freeze Medi-Cal enrollment for adults without legal status.
I don't want to be in this position, but we are in this position. And instead of rolling back the program, meaning cutting people off for basic care, we have to adjust the comprehensive nature of the care.
The proposal would still allow children without legal status to have access to Medi-Cal. Democrats in the state legislature are expected to push back on Newsom's proposal during the final month of budget negotiations. A final budget will be adopted in mid-June. For NPR News, I'm Laura Fitzgerald in Sacramento.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down 60 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A Boston City Council resolution called for the removal of disgraced Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson was blocked for a second straight week. The Herald reports that Councilor Liz Breeden objected yesterday to a non-binding resolution co-sponsored by Councilors Erin Murphy and Ed Flynn that called for the council to formally address the matter of Fernandez Anderson's continued service. Breeden's objection blocked a vote on the matter and automatically sent the resolution to a council committee for a potential hearing. The votes come in the wake of Fernandez's conviction on federal corruption charges. Arts organizations on Cape Cod are getting hit by the cancellation of federal grants. The Trump administration has terminated hundreds of grants awarded by the National Endowment for the Arts. One group, the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, losing $40,000. Executive Director Julie Wake says that money would have gone to individual artists and cultural organizations on the Cape.
It's not going to destroy any organizations for not getting $40,000, but it just feels like, wow, it's impacting us here on the Cape and the islands, and it's really sad. And we have artists that really rely on this type of funding. She says the foundation is looking for ways to fill the gap. Meanwhile, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown received notice that it lost $200,000 in federal grants. Other groups are affected as well. Rain ending today, otherwise cloudy mid-70s. We are at 66 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Total Wine & More. For discovering something new this summer, like a Chardonnay, sparkling wine, or tequila, learn more at TotalWine.com. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Available to adults 21 or older.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Margery Eagan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Carbon Leaf, the indie folk band who just released their 15th studio album. Plus, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner asked the Attorney General that with Andrea Campbell will be with us at the library May 21st, 1 to 2. Mayor Michelle Wu will be with us May 28th from noon to 1. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley joins us at noon today. One of her constituents was Ramesa Ozturk, Chuck, who was returned from a detention facility in Louisiana after being snatched off the streets in Somerville. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So first, though, here with us via Zoom is podcast entrepreneur Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Toddcast, political analyst, former moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning, guys. Nice
Hey,
to talk
Chuck.
with you.
You too.
So we were running the first hour of the hearing, the Supreme Court hearing on birthright citizenship beforehand. And I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it or not, but I'm just wondering what you think of this whole, what your sense is politically of the birthright issue, where people are, where the Supreme Court could be.
So the fact that this case really lets the Supreme Court take an exit ramp, meaning they don't have to rule I don't think they're going to end up ruling on birthright citizenship. I think the ruling's going to be more about the injunction issue.
Explain that to people. The single
this is
justice.
about whether, right, it's about can one lower court, do an injunction before the Supreme Court weighs in. And this is frustrated the Trump White House, but of course this happened to the Biden White House, which is you judge shop. You find one that's on your side that puts your injunction in, right? We saw conservatives do this during Biden, whether it was on student loans, mifepristone, things like that. And you're seeing certainly opponents of Donald Trump do the same thing. So that's one part of this argument, which, anytime, what have we learned about the Roberts Court? If there's an exit ramp, he takes it. Right? He always takes it. He will only answer the question that's clearly got to be answered at some point when there is the proverbial legal gun to his head. Right? And so I'm assuming he will find a way to punt and not deal with this question and hope it doesn't come back to him.
Two things. One, the one place I disagree with you on Roberts is where I think he wrote a critical decision where he went far beyond what he had to. Don't you think the immunity decision on the presidency was a bit extreme and excessive?
Well, I do, and that's a fair point. That's a counterpoint. It's one of the few times he's done that.
I agree with that. And, getting back to this without giving everybody in the audience a headache about nationwide injunctions from individual courts, we were listening to most of the oral argument for the first, that which we could understand. There was a lot of it that was technical. I had no idea what they were talking about. I have to
Rule
say.
23, I was confused.
Well, that was the
there.
class action. I didn't know it was, but then they finally
Are you gonna go to your law school professors and say, how come I don't know this?
By the way, I will tell you very briefly, I had one case before the Supreme Court with a co-counsel. All I can say is, thank God she did the oral argument and I carried the briefcase. It was terrifying. I mean, as you heard in this thing, they are relentless. Yeah. I mean, it is just incredible. In any case, what I started to say was the absurdity of arguing against a nationwide injunction. Trump does the executive order on birthright citizenship. If they can't do a nationwide injunction, so what does that mean? He repeals the 14th Amendment as relates to birthright citizenship in like 47 states. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean... And I have to say, most of the judges, at least from I hate to predict, you should never predict, even the conservative justices who spoke, maybe with the exception of Thomas, seemed to suggest this was ridiculous, that an individual judge could leave those kind of gaping holes. So let's go to something that is not speculative. Jake Tapper from CNN has a new book out called Original Sin. The original sin is, I don't know if he uses the word cover up. I haven't seen the book yet, but read the reviews, that essentially everybody close to or was able to get close to Biden, family, close advisors, etc. A lot of Democrats who knew better covered up his declining cognitive and physical abilities. What's your reaction to what you've heard so far, Chuck Todd?
Well, I mean, it's exact. I mean, this is what I experienced as a reporter, which was impossible to sort of penetrate the bubble. Others were saying the party line, oh, he's fine, and my dealings with him and all of that. It really is, though, this it's been fascinating to watch Democrats try to deal with this, right? I think you've got to be more straightforward on it and just admit, we were wrong. We were snowed, look, this is on the Bidens. I go back, I can't believe he ran for president in the first place, given everything that was going on in his personal life with his kids.
So you mean the first time? You mean the first time? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I think he brought he brought a bunch of this stuff on himself. His ambition, he's always, here's the picture to me that's been painted now very clearly. He is as selfish as any politician that you've ever accused of being selfish. He put his own interests before the country. He put his own interests before the party. He put his own interests before his family. Other than that, I don't have a lot of criticism for him.
I'm sorry.
We should recall that very early on in his life, he had that tragedy, that terrible car accident right around Christmas where he lost the mother of his 3 children and a little baby girl. And, you just think about that he still was going to take a train back and forth. It wasn't that far, but still, Delaware to New York City, to Washington, D.C., and leave those kids. I certainly, let's switch the gender. Would a mother do that if it were the other way around?
Well, you bring up an important point, Marjorie. His biography before 2018, that part of his biography was, wow, he was such a devoted father that he commuted home every night. Yeah. You can easily take the same set of facts and say he was so ambitious he commuted to work every day.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I know.
As you just said, and you're absolutely right, would a woman senator elected in 1972 under those circumstances been able to do that and politically get away with it? All right.
2 things I'd like to say. One, I want to do a shout out to a former Globe reporter, then the Washington Post, then the Wall Street Journal. Annie Linsky was on with us a day or two after she wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal, which was one of the first pieces saying this is happening. She was eviscerated left and right, well, not right, obviously, and she was right. So that's number one. Number two, it seems to me that, all this stuff I've been reading in the last 24 hours about this, the Democratic reaction to what's in the book, other than Seth Moulton, who early on said he should step down, and a few other people, this notion that we want to look forward, we can't look back.
Oh, please.
Democrats have to address this thing. If, as they say, we were wrong, we knew more, we didn't know more, but those who did committed a horrible original sin, they got to address this, don't they?
So I had Ro Khanna. He's my guest on my podcast today, and he wanted me to, he sent me a tweet and a statement that he put out last night. And he said, to rebuild trust, Democrats must be honest. In light of the facts that have come out, Joe Biden should not have run for re-election, and we should have had an open primary.
Good for him.
He went on to say, and he tags myself and David Axelrod saying, Chuck Todd and David Axelrod were right on this. We were 2 of the early people openly questioning this early on, and I've certainly had a dialogue with him about this for a while. But I think that's the smart way to handle it. Chris Murphy has done the same thing.
Yeah, you're right.
I was on CNN a couple days ago, and Chuck Schumer was being interviewed by Casey Hunt, and he just sat there. I'm looking forward. Come on, man. Just admit it. And I'm sorry. Ultimately the blame, in that same segment, Begala was like, I think the whole Democratic Party should accept some blame here. But Begala's whole point was, well, it's ultimately Joe Biden. And there's look, that's 85% right. But more Democrats could have not criticized Dean Phillips when he was out there saying it. More Democrats, you know what I mean? There were a lot of it. This wasn't, the thing that I get my back up about is the criticism of the press, as if somehow the press was covering this up. Just the opposite. I was writing poll questions asking about age. We were trying to get it into the ether, sort of force the conversation because it was clear, I do think the White House press corps, meaning the folks that were in that room, did not harp on this enough. Where's the president today? How come we're not going to see him today? I think myself and others, if we'd been in there in a similar situation, might have just constantly beat that drum a little bit more, and that could have been done. And there certainly were pundits on cable channels who wanted to protect their own personal access to the president, and they went out of their way to protect him. But, they shouldn't be conflated with the actual journalists who were trying to ask questions and trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
Well, a couple of things about this. It seems to me this could mark the end of Kamala Harris because obviously she was the vice president. She knew about these things.
I think Biden baggage is going to be very heavy for any Democrat, and she's going to carry more of it than anybody else that would run for president.
But I also wonder, how, there are a lot of anonymous sources in here, so we don't know exactly who knew what. But I admit when all the stories about Biden's stumbling and he couldn't talk and stuff, a lot of them came from Fox. And because Fox has a huge credibility problem with me, I didn't believe a lot of them because I thought,
Margery, once we saw the debate, you didn't have to worry about it just being.
Jim, this started long.
No, there was no
before
doubt.
the
Fox was
debate.
manufacturing a narrative. There was no doubt.
Yeah.
But Joe Biden was providing plenty of fodder to manufacture said narrative.
That's right.
But sometimes the narrative, I mean, look, a broken clock is right twice, right? Stop, blind squirrel, you name it. The narrative, it's like, somebody could bang on the left for creating a narrative that Donald Trump's corrupt and crooked. Well, some narratives happen to be true, right?
But anyway, the point is, I think a lot of regular Joe and Janes didn't believe it initially because they were not part of the Washington press corps.
Right.
And they thought Fox did not have a record for.
Can I make one last
truth.
point about this?
I'm
sorry.
Still, but I want to know, and maybe Tapper gets into this. They obviously, those people close to him, did know there was a big problem. He had very few cabinet meetings and wasn't meeting the press and stuff. So
wasn't meeting with cabinet members apparently.
That's very few cabinet meetings. Yeah. So what did they think was going to happen? They were that because he was obviously going to get worse. You figure this is age related.
I think it's TDS. I think it's TDS.
What's
Trump
that?
derangement syndrome.
Trump derangement syndrome. Okay.
Meaning the confidence that there's Trump. And it's actually a very logical. I think it's a very, you look at Joe Biden, and if you sat there and you said, yeah, but Donald Trump, right? So people were making. I go back, and this is a human nature thing. It goes to an old line that Joe Biden himself used to say: "Judge me not by the Almighty, but by the alternative." And I think a lot of Democrats in Congress, and I think a lot of those that worked for him, rationalized the situation by saying, well, it is a crazy guy over here who the country doesn't like, and we've got our guy who stumbles around and, but at least he's, people know where he stands, et cetera, et cetera. I think if Donald Trump is not the Republican nominee or not the likely Republican nominee, I think that everybody's a lot more honest about this.
Yeah.
I really do think that the judgment of a lot of Democrats were clouded by the fact that Donald Trump was sitting over on the other side and basically believing he was going to be a fairly easy mark.
The last thing I want to say about this in anticipation, we haven't read the text in the last few minutes. I'm assuming a ton of you are going to say, how dare you spend so much time on this when Donald Trump is a rapist, a felon, is destroying democracy.
I hear that in my own house.
Those things are.
I hear that. Why are you guys talking about this? And I'm like, we guys,
they're all true.
Why is Joe Biden going on The View?
But this is a really,
painting.
But it's a really serious issue about democracy. So the answer is we are going to talk about it, and maybe talk about it with you guys in the next few days. But for now, we're talking to Chuck Todd. Okay, so Chuck, I want to get to the Republican side of the equation for a second. I was among I think, naive souls who thought that there was no chance that Mike Johnson could get the big, beautiful bill with these incredibly deep cuts, the things that people actually care about, like Medicaid, through the House. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think there were 3 committee votes yesterday, and all on party lines. They advanced their own little piece of the big, beautiful bill. Am I right about that?
You are, but you got to realize the fine print here. This is why you do have a few conservatives are upset that they're phony work requirements, because none of them kick in for 4 years. The tax cuts only happen during Trump's term. Like, there are so many sort of math
manipulations.
I don't know what to call them. Yeah, manipulations of the spreadsheet here in order to make the numbers look like they work for the CBO, because you have to assume these absurdities like, oh, the tax cuts will expire on December 31st, 2028. And so they're basically they're putting in pay-fors or certain restrictions on certain benefits, but they don't kick in for 3 years or 4 years. Mm-hmm. Basically, they're going to let another Congress repeal it. And that's what's going to happen, right? These so-called work requirements on Medicaid will get softened or almost fully repealed when they actually have to be implemented in 2029. So it really is smoke and mirrors and then some when it comes to the math they've created, which is why they're going to pass something, okay? Right? It's going to be a mess. It's probably, the numbers are never going to add up. And that's the world Donald Trump has created. It doesn't matter if the numbers don't add up in 2029 as long as he gets what he wants in 2027.
So you're suggesting don't get all your undies in a proverbial bundle?
Well, I'm
Jim?
just saying that I think this bill I think this bill is such a mess. It is so it's not functional what it's going to do. They'll hurry up and get the goodies out, so they'll be doing the tax breaks part of it. All the other stuff doesn't kick in for 3 or 4 years, and that is just we all know what's going to happen. It'll probably be a Democratic House, right? It'll probably be a different makeup of the Senate, a more narrow Republican majority or whatever. When the painful parts of these cuts happen, and they won't happen. It's why your Chip Roys are, if he did actually care about these things, and I think he intellectually believes he does, right? But knows he's about to get rolled and will allow himself to get rolled. But his criticism of this is absolutely correct. It is BS what they've done. They've just created a situation. So yes, Democrats could say that is the plan, is to create these potential cuts down the road, but they're never going to happen because they're down the road.
Okay, so let me ask you a stupid question. Then how does this save any money?
It won't.
It won't.
It's going to cost us money. It's going to explode the debt. No, I mean, look, all my deficit friends, I get all these email press releases from like the Pete Peterson Foundation and all these. God love them, right? They have a constituency of none, because we've all learned, right? The constituency for people. There are two issues that people should care about but don't. One is the debt. The other is campaign finance.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't matter.
How brazen it is, how absurd it is. The public just goes, because guess what? We don't look at our credit card debt unless we really, really have to. We don't look, right? We behave the same way. We behave the same way as these politicians do, and we wonder how come they aren't responsible.
Okay,
we're
so
not that responsible ourselves at times.
So I have one last question. So all those people, remember, because there was such an opposition to Obamacare when Obamacare first tried to pass it, that a lot of these conservative states wouldn't expand protections under Obamacare to very poor people, and so they had
giving up free federal money. By the way,
federal money. So we should not.
But Obama knew that eventually they would do it,
which they did.
And they did.
I forget the state that defied all their leaders. The voters voted.
It was Idaho, I think.
It was Idaho.
Right?
Okay, they voted to expand Medicaid in their state so they could get health insurance. But my question is: so we should not be fretting that these millions of people will be thrown off their Obamacare coverage because it's not going to happen until there's Democrats.
I have an answer when Chuck's done.
Yeah, look, I think you're going to hear about it a lot.
Yep.
And I think the fact is it will be a successful. Look, I believe that it will be a successful campaign strategy. It always is, and you'll have a majority that rolls this back in 2 years.
Yeah, and let me tell you, there's another factor that we talk about this a lot, or at least I do on the show. Fear is a pretty horrible thing to live with.
Yes.
And when you are poor or you're old and you're dependent upon Medicaid, even if Chuck Todd is the last word on these issues, you hear it, you nod your head, you turn off the radio, and then you say, but what if this does happen? And Donald Trump is powerful. That part, again, I hope it doesn't
And there's intent.
Yeah, exactly. It's intent, and it generates fear. By the way, we have a ton of texts already, exactly as I thought. Here's the best one, according to our staff. Anonymous texter. I would have elected Joe in a wheelchair and iron lung on life support over this criminal.
Well, I guess that's what they hoped in a way. They could keep
By the way, the
wraps.
revote even now might be really close.
We're talking to Chuck.
Well, we're sitting here, especially in Boston, with all the attacks on Harvard, and you say to yourself, because I don't think anybody should believe it's about anti-Semitism anymore. It's obviously not about anti-Semitism. They got a big problem with those Islamophobia over there at Harvard, too. Nobody's mentioning that from the federal government. But in any case, you say, we lead the world in our research. I mean, universities are the part of the educational system in the United States that really shines. These are places that do so much. Mass General, one of the finest hospitals in the world. Why do you want to screw that? I mean, it's just so crazy. All these diseases.
Marjorie, the irony is where Donald Trump is right now, right? The Middle East in the Gulf states. Whenever you meet these wealthy Gulf state guys, who are, they have prince titles, I refuse to accept these places as monarchies. They're no, I don't believe in any monarchy. They're all dictatorships. One's benevolent, one's, malevolent. But anyway, but guess where they're all educated?
In the United States of America. And
That's right.
where do they come when they've got cancer? To Mass General.
And Marjorie, when I've known this around the world, I've probably met over 150 people, world politicians, global politicians, whether in the leadership position or members of parliaments, things like that. About 80% of them were educated in the United States.
Yeah. And
this is globally, the leadership class of the globe is educated here. And look, it's you see this. There's a race in Australia to go recruit American scientists.
It makes
There's
me
a race in
cry.
France,
China.
It should.
Yeah.
It should. This was our soft power. Donald Trump, believes in his masculinity and toxic masculinity and all this stuff and his hard power. He's giving up all this soft power, AID soft power. They're going to hate us in Africa for the rest of this century for the crap we're doing and not doing right now. And we're not going to educate the world's democratic leaders, which 20 years from now we're going to regret when these folks are educated in other countries, maybe even under other political systems. It is his either not caring about it or just lack of knowledge about how something like that works. Like, Donald Trump's never thought about long-term anything, right? That's why he's the king of debt.
But
right?
even if he's thought about all the things you say he hasn't thought about, he hates the elites who have contempt for him. And this is a way to get back at all of those elites, even though some of those elites are in the United States Senate on the Republican side, the J.D. Vances, the Cruzes, by the way, we should say, when you mention...
I don't think it's about hating elites at all.
I think it's...
I think it's having these people under his thumb. He's just pissed off. He wants them under his thumb, begging for their money back.
But why?
Well, I think it's I think it's revenge. It's he and Stephen Miller.
I do too.
It's revenge for a few things. For him, it's obviously just personal revenge. But for Stephen Miller, it's the fact that, if you served in the first Trump term, you couldn't get on a corporate board. You couldn't get into academia. You couldn't get all the stuff that everybody else, right? Margaret Spellings became the chancellor of the UNC system, right?
Yeah.
Bush administration people got jobs everywhere. Obama administration people working at Netflix and Amazon and United Airlines. And so that's where this bitterness comes from. And this is where, look, I understand why many of these corporations shunned anybody from the Trump White House, right? You're like, anybody that does this January 6th business, this corrupt. But I understand how they viewed it as political unfairness and how it was used as grievance to galvanize the right here a little bit. So I'm worried this is going to institute just sort of tit for tat for a couple of decades here.
I have to disagree with one thing Chuck said at the end. He's talking about this person going to UNC and, nobody on the Trump side. UNC has Bill Belichick, a Trump supporter. So there's balance. Don't you think there's balance?
There you go.
And also,
can I just tell you?
Yeah.
When my daughter turned 21 last week, the second thought in my mind was, oh, my God, she's only 3 years younger than Bill Belichick's girlfriend.
Well, excuse me.
Right.
She was 19 when they met, by the way.
I really, my wife and I have talked about this. Like, if this were my kid, well, I'd get involved. I'd be like, no, you're not.
Your wife.
I would say, I'd like to think I would say, like, dude, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but my daughter's not a part of this. Stay away from her.
The father sat next to Belichick at the Miss Maine contest the other day in the front row.
And your wife is probably not running the Aero sex shop down in Provincetown where she's giving instructions on...
What are you saying? That's her mother. Her mother has nothing to do with her.
I'm saying that's the mother.
Oh, the mother of the kid,
yeah,
right.
Maybe they have a different...
Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's a different perspective.
Toys are toys.
Toys
I just
are
got
toys.
a problem. I got a problem with grandparents and grandchildren dating.
Oh, I'm so with you.
All right.
I think that's a line. I don't know. That's just me. It's crazy. I know.
Chuck, we'll see you next week. Be well, Chuck.
Bye, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with political analyst Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Todd Cast, a political analysis podcast, which is a great analysis. You don't even get to half the stuff he talks about. Former moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. Coming up after this quick break. As the Supreme Court hears oral arguments about birthright citizenship, a pillar of our constitutional rights as Americans, we're going to open the lines to ask you, if this issue is up for debate, what does it say about where we are as a nation? And what do you think about the efforts to get rid of birthright citizenship? Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Blythewald, with big, beautiful bamboo birds. 6 sculptures in the gardens, 15 to 30 feet tall, by artist duo The Mythmakers. Blythewald.org. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And Native Plant Trust, celebrating 10 years of Trillium Week during peak spring bloom this week at Garden in the Woods. Special events and more at nativeplanttrust.org. And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Margery Eagan. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow, starting a little after 10 if you're listening to NPR. The 9 Supreme Court justices have been hearing oral arguments on whether people born in this country are citizens of this country, whether their parents are documented or not. Here's a little bit of the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1866 after the Civil War. All persons born, that was my emphasis, are naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. and of the state wherein they reside. And yet here we are with the highest court weighing this question after Trump's executive order, it was issued on the day of his inauguration, by the way, challenging birthright for those born here whose parents are in the country illegally. And since the order, you should know, 3 federal judges of all different political persuasions have ruled his executive order is blatantly unconstitutional. Now, as we discussed with Chuck, there's another procedural issue.
You know what everybody's texting about?
What?
Joe Biden.
Well, let's do that tomorrow, okay?
Okay.
There's a procedural issue about whether or not individual justices can issue nationwide injunctions. We'll get to that with Nancy Gertner tomorrow. We want to get your thoughts on birthright citizenship. Should anybody be born in this country automatically be a citizen? And if you think not, is your position, well, even though I'm against it, the 14th Amendment mandates it, and that is the law of the land. The number is 877-301-8970. You know, my first question for Nancy Gertner tomorrow on this is, in light of the fact that all 3 lower courts ruled that it is constitutionally mandated that if you're born here, you're a citizen, and every Supreme Court decision, from what I understand to this point in history, has said this is what the 14th Amendment provision means. Why is the Supreme Court even taking up the case? Where's the dispute that causes them to have to make this determination? I don't really quite get it. And by the way, a really heartening
thing. That is a great
thing.
question, actually.
Did you see the Associated Press poll that came out yesterday?
People don't want it.
Really hard.
Yeah.
They do want it.
They want birthright citizenship.
And
they don't want to get rid of it, I should
But it really shows a level of sophistication and compassion that I didn't think existed. It's roughly even on mass deportation. But when it comes to earlier polls on due process rights for people like Abrego Garcia, who's in that jail, and people support him, or at least the due process rights. And people by, I don't know what the number is, I don't have it right in front of me, close to 2-1 say birthright citizenship should be enforced. Again, even though they're in roughly equal numbers in favor of mass deportation. Well, you know, that's a hopeful sign to me.
When you think of the practicalities of it, okay, if you're not an American citizen and you're born here, what does that mean? Do you get to go to public school? Do you get to get health care? Do you get to get a job? I mean,
I'll tell you what they think. You should be deported. And if you can't go back to the country that you were not born in, but that your parents were from, then they'll just deport you to a third country.
Yeah, I just think...
They're lesser thans. In the mind of this administration, there are a lot of lesser thans. Don't you agree? And if you're born to people who are undocumented, even though they are human beings who in most cases were striving for a better life for their family, then you don't count. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And you think of the people that would impact, like Michelle Wu, who's the mayor of Boston.
That's a good point. That's a fine
She would have
point.
been deported long ago.
That's right.
Her whole family would have been deported long ago, and no one could have gone to Harvard or Harvard Law School, which the president has really wants to have underneath his thumb. Anyway, people are emailing about, but we'll talk about it later. The Joe Biden thing.
Why don't you say that a few more times since we're not talking about it? Okay, what we are talking about is birthright citizenship. We'll get to the Biden issue tomorrow, possibly. Scott in Boston, you are next, or first on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hey, guys. So this largely feels like it largely feels like a racial issue for all these people who are up in arms against birthright citizenship. And I just have this sinking feeling that if it was only, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people from Scandinavia, they wouldn't care. But because they're not, it's an issue.
Or white South Africans.
Yeah.
Or white South Africans,
right.
to be fair.
I am
100%
with you.
South African move sort of undermines everything else that they're doing.
Think about it. We're going to talk in a few minutes to Congresswoman Pressley about ending of temporary protected status for Haitians. Venezuelans, Cubans. They don't look like white America, do they?
Saying, we can't have people getting killed.
Scott, thanks for the call.
We can't have people getting killed. Well, what do you think is going on in these other countries that you're throwing back to get killed?
You can't even get a flight back to Haiti, by the way. If they end the status and they have to, quote, go back to Haiti, I don't know how you get there. 877-301-8970. Do you not agree with that first caller? It's race-inspired, is it not?
Well, the only thing that undermines that is that you had millions and millions of people who are people of color voting for Donald Trump. The Latino vote was huge for Trump.
A minority voted for him. If every person of color could not vote, he would have won by a larger margin. He just won a larger share than he had in the past, but a majority still voted for the Democrats.
White people voted for
a majority of people of color voted for him overall, too. Just a larger minority voted for him than had voted for him in the past.
But that kind of undermines the racist theory.
Not to me, it doesn't.
To me, it's like I got mine and too bad.
Well, I don't agree with you.
You're at the bottom of the ladder kind of thing. Because look at all those Latinos that voted for Trump.
I think it's all, again, but overall, the number of people of color who voted for Trump was fewer than half. More than half voted for Kamala Harris. Allen Road, next. Hi.
How you doing, guys?
Good.
I'm concerned that this is just the first step to deporting anyone he doesn't agree with. I mean, why doesn't he deport me?
I think you're on the list, Al, as far as I know.
I've thought about that, Al, from time to time.
Al, you mean what you're saying, right? Because I happen to agree with you. You mean this, right? You're not just being rhetorically whatever, right?
No, I absolutely mean it. And honestly, I feel a little odd saying it out loud because I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is the first step in a progression that's dangerous, and I don't trust him to follow the law in any way, shape, or form. So if he can deport people who don't have citizens as parents, then what? Do you need both parents to be citizens?
Well, and do they have to vote for Trump? Al, when people tell you that you're a conspiracy theorist, Stephen Miller, the most important advisor to Donald Trump the other day, stood up and said we may repeal habeas corpus because there has been a, quote, invasion of this country, which is just factually not even remotely true. But he uses this BS to say a critical provision in the Constitution could be suspended by the president. So I think it's not that much of a leap to go from that to where you are. Al, thanks for the call. Don't let them do it. 877-301-8970 is the number there.
You know how Chuck Todd was saying that we shouldn't worry too much about Medicaid because a lot of the impacts will not be felt.
Yeah. By which time there'll be Democrats and a majority of this or that, whatever. Yeah,
Michelle in Medfield is not so sure. She says there's no reason to believe the Dems will be in power in 3 years. No reason to believe there will be free and fair elections in 3 years.
Good point.
They plan to rewrite the Constitution before Trump is out of office. He's encouraging us to be complacent and not not to do anything about it. She's much more pessimistic than Chuck was. Jane in Concord, thank you for calling.
Hi, Jane.
Good morning.
Hi.
I think Trump is being a total hypocrite, and I'll remind everybody, including myself, that he mentioned that people were eating pets in Ohio during the debate, even though Biden looked worse. He was a nut job then. And he also called Zelensky a dictator and then said the next day to a reporter, did I say that? Mm-hmm. But in this case, Trump also opposes families from bringing other family members, like sponsoring them for citizenship. And yet that's what he did while he was president to Melania's sister and parents. So I think we should be questioning Barron citizenship and Ivanka Jr. there, and Don Jr. and Eric also. Maybe they shouldn't be citizens.
You're making Marjorie happy here, Jane. Thanks for
Jane, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970. We're talking about what the Supreme Court is hearing arguments this morning about birthright citizenship. It's also about whether one federal judge can make a ruling that impacts the entire country, and that's the issue that they're probably going to hone in on, don't you think?
I would assume so. Do we have to take a break, or are we not taking a break? We do. Why don't we take a break now, and then we'll continue.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to keep talking about this until the top of the hour. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. And M&M Skylights, servicing Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Their team is part of the Velux Skylight Specialist Network and is committed to helping improve the air quality in your home or business. Consultations and more information at mmskylights.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. BostonSpeakers.org. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Eagan and Jim Braude are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow. We're talking about the Supreme Court oral argument this morning. We brought you the first hour live on NPR around birthright citizenship and around nationwide injunctions. An anonymous texter says, can you please clarify? I don't think the court is taking up the birthright citizenship issue. It seems the government has appealed the nationwide injunction but does not want the court to decide the citizenship issue, right? Trying to follow. I think technically you are right, but as Amy Coney Barrett herself said, was it in the immunity decision where she said they went far further than the case before them required? The point is this Supreme Court thinks they can decide whatever they choose to decide, even if it is not the norm. So I think you're right. We'll clarify this with Judge Gertner tomorrow, that the issue is, can one federal judge, I think there are 93 districts, I'm not sure, issue a nationwide injunction, but could they reach the underlying question of whether or not the 14th Amendment guarantees that if you're born here, regardless of where your parents are from, that you are a citizen? I think they could. We'll see.
Listen to this one from Maria from Warwick. She has a very existential question here. So does this mean my mother was not a citizen because her mother wasn't born here, and then I'm not a citizen because my mother wasn't a citizen?
Yes, you should self-deport. That's the answer. I mean, I don't want to be harsh, but I think to save us, the taxpayers' money, you should just get the hell out and get out now. And if your mother's still alive, I don't mean to be disrespectful, take her with you. You know, this self-deporting thing. If you heard,
but that's what he wants.
You don't listen to a lot of other radio stations. I listen to virtually everything to get a taste.
Do you listen to sports radio?
I know a little bit. I do.
Are they talking about
The
self-deportation on sports
ads
radio?
on some Christy Gnome's head of DHS
she
ads
is a nauseating
where
person.
she's doing this tough talking, deport yourself. or we're going to come get you. And then she has to make sure she works in because President Donald J. Trump. I mean, the sycophancy. That meeting where we played sound a couple of weeks ago, where grown men and women, most of whom are quite accomplished, had to go around the room, the cabinet secretaries, and praise Donald Trump, was one of the most demeaning exercises I've ever seen in my life.
It's what they do in places like Russia.
That is exactly.
That's what they do in places like Russia. You know, it is incredible to think that Kristi Noem, who shot to death her puppy because the puppy wouldn't follow instructions.
That is correct.
I mean, what kind of person is she? Then did she shoot the goat before or after she shot the puppy that wasn't
She
following
gave an
instructions?
opportunity, in fairness, and you're not being fair as usual, she gave the goat an opportunity to self-deport. And it said 15 seconds, you can leave, or I'm going to shoot you.
That kind of says it all, doesn't it?
You think so?
Yeah. And also that you show up at a prison where people are standing there in their underwear, all these men in their underwear.
It's in El Salvador.
And you got, these really tight clothes on, plus you're wearing
$50,000
Rolex watch. I don't know.
No humanity, I believe. Is
no
the
humanity.
notion.
I guess that's it.
Joanna in Lowell, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're attempting to talk about birthright citizenship. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Oh,
yes.
okay, great.
Perfectly. Hi.
I'm delighted to be on. I love you
Good.
guys.
Thank you.
I was thinking along the lines of Maria, who texted you.
Yeah.
That this is a slippery slope, and it reminds me of when I'm knitting and I drop a stitch. You know, how many generations? How far down?
That's pretty good.
How many rows are we going to?
Yeah, that's a
are
great
we going to go down? Yeah, so that's basically it. And I've been listening to the Supreme Court, and I'm delighted that it sounds to me, and of course I'm biased, like they're barely tolerating this lawyer that it's presenting this case.
Well, in all fairness, though,
fairness,
if you ever listen to oral arguments, the justices, most of them, particularly the really smart ones, give all lawyers a really tough time. And as I say, I sat in that room once, terrorizing. Johanna, thanks for the call. Brittany in the South End was a text that I was soliciting before, not her, but she did. I don't necessarily agree with birthright citizenship as a concept. Most countries don't use the system. In fact, I think it's true that of the 20 biggest democracies, only Canada and the U.S. have it.
This is where people want to come.
But let's finish her text. But since it's in our Constitution, we have to recognize it and uphold it, and that is exactly the point for those who agree or disagree. And Meg from Reading goes on to say the decision might have far-reaching repercussions than just this one issue. This relates to the nationwide injunction. It's true, and at least from what we heard in the first hour, even though I didn't understand a lot of the technicalities, the situation is that if it turns out it is limited in all cases to the one jurisdiction where the federal district court is sitting, then that means, if I have my numbers right, that in the interim, an executive order of a president that may be unconstitutional on its face is still in effect in 92 jurisdictions, unless there are 93 lawsuits or a national class action. And the lawyer for Trump, by the way, was even saying class actions may not be appropriate. So if it's not a nationwide injunction and a class action might not be appropriate, how do you challenge what you believe to be an unconstitutional action? The answer is you're screwed. I believe that's the term.
Thank you for that, Jim.
Well, thank you. It's my legal opinion.
John from Westford, thank you for calling.
Hey, John. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Good.
I feel just like the Second Amendment is up for interpretations, I think so is the 14th. A lot of scholars say that it only applies to legally being in the U.S. legally, whether it's a visa or a passport, and that's not really. I think that's the argument right now.
What's that again? Give me that again, John. About visas? Did you say?
No, that it only applies to those that are here legally.
Well, let me read it to you, John. Here's what it says, and I'm not editing it. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the U.S. and the state wherein they reside. All persons. And by the way, you're right. There are some, I wouldn't say a lot. There are a few legal scholars, but I think you'd have to agree that the overwhelming number of legal scholars, so even those who, like Brittany texting a minute ago, don't like the policy, say the language is clear on its face. And don't you agree with that?
Well, I mean, I think it's up. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well,
but
I'm not either.
I mean, if you can look into but you went to law school.
Sort of, yeah.
in Guatemala at night.
I couldn't get into the Guatemala
place
school.
else. Yeah.
John, let me also quarrel with something you said. You'll be surprised by this. Sadly, in my opinion, the Second Amendment is settled. The case, the D.C. case a couple of years ago, 5-4, said what I thought was preposterous, which is a militia's individual people.
Yeah.
Even though the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia, they said by a one-vote majority that it applies to individuals bearing arms. So that's determined, and I would argue this one is too. But as always, John, we really appreciate it when you call. Thanks for the call. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Do you think about it? Those of us, and a lot of us do, have grandparents that came from other countries.
Yeah.
I have no idea if they became.
I just signed up for Ancestry. Did I tell you this?
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if my grandparents became citizens.
Yeah.
Do you know if your grandparents were citizens?
Didn't
you say you were somebody that came from Russia?
They were citizens.
How do you know?
Ultimately, they became.
How do
I know?
Yeah.
Because I just spoke to some guy on the corner. I can't tell you who.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. We're going to get whisked out of here, like mid-show. We're going to be like talking about something with Trump, and all of a sudden, they're going to be like a couple people in the street and Jamie hosting
lots
the
of
show.
People do. That's the other
Jamie's
thing.
probably illegal too, by the way.
A lot of people did not come here
or
through Ellis Island either.
Yeah,
They came here other ways. This idea that everybody came in Ellis Island and they had to go through all the rigmarole there, but that's not true either.
You know what could happen? The end of the day could
Some
be
people
like
just swam
the only
here.
people left: Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, and Donald Trump. It's like three people roaming the landscape here.
When Chuck Todd was talking about Stephen Miller and talking about people from the Trump administration couldn't get jobs, just take a look at Stephen Miller, and I ask you,
this is harsh.
Would you hire him?
He is the scariest person.
Would you hire
on earth,
him for 2 seconds? I mean, I wouldn't hire him to cross the street. He's a scary-looking guy.
Another unfair statement, but there's a Kentucky prison looking for an executioner, and I believe he's in the final three. He's a finalist
for him.
with a leg up.
He is one scary guy. He was ticked off way back in high school.
I want to say this. I know I say it every time Stephen Miller comes up, but you got to listen to the sound. In fact, can we get this sound again? If we can get it in the next 5 minutes, fine. If not, we'll play it tomorrow. This is him running, I believe, for high school president.
That's right.
Somewhere in California, where he's trashing the janitors. Why should I have to pick up the garbage when the Latino... He doesn't say Latino in the quote, but they were Latino janitors.
Why don't he just throw everything on the floor and let them, keep lunch,
But he was really angry. Have you seen the video or just heard the sound? I've seen the video. He is one angry high school student.
Well, you know what they say, Jim? It all comes back to how things went in high school.
Yeah.
And I suspect things didn't go that well for the poor guy
Didn't
in
go
high
that well
school.
for me either, frankly.
Yeah, well...
Didn't.
Well,
okay.
Nick,
I rest my case is what she's trying to say.
Nick from Hartford, thank you for
calling.
calling.
Okay, good. Hi.
Hey, guys. So, as I've mentioned on the show a while ago, I am the parent of a wonderful little dude whose grandparents were refugees from Thailand and Laos during the Vietnam War. My dad's parents came over from Italy. For the life of me, I can't see anything that these people complaining about birthright citizenship have done to warrant moral authority other than just be lucky enough to be born in a certain place at a certain time.
That's great.
And as someone who's worked on farms with any number of migrant workers who had to come over because Americans didn't want to do those jobs, I might add, I am wholly disinterested in what these people think makes a good citizen. Tell them to get a different job or go somewhere else if they hate it here. But I cannot abide by this hate.
You know, Nick, that was yet another spectacular phone call. That was just perfect.
Thank you.
Very much for that.
Thank you very much.
And it is the luck of the draw, by the way. And I know what people are thinking. There are rules and there are rules. But if you spend time and are not mesmerized by they're all rapists and murderers thing, the vast, vast majority who've come into the people coming to this country undocumented are fleeing violence, an economy which doesn't allow them to feed their children. And as sort of in the spirit of Nick, even though I can't say it with as much articulation as he did, who listening to the show, regardless of your politics, would not do exactly what these parents did if it was in your estimation, to save your family?
We're going to be murdered or your son's going to be taken away in a gang. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And you know what else is ridiculous? When they look at, the Globe runs every year the valedictorians of all the high schools. And when you look at the valedictorians of all the high schools, large numbers of them, sometimes majority of them, are people kids who just got here from
And
another country.
didn't speak English when they got here.
I remember one year they had two boys who were twins, and they got here from the killing fields of Cambodia. This is a while ago, obviously. But they were both valedictorians, 10 of their class. I mean, when you look at who really succeeds in the United States of America, it's often first-generation people, the children of immigrants, right? Or in that case, the immigrants themselves who came here. I mean, a quarter of the people that go to Harvard University are from other countries. Now, part of that is because they pay full freight, and that makes them more attracted to Harvard. But part of it is because they've got big brains.
Well, but I would argue Trump is fine with those people, with wealthier elite.
He's trying to take away their ability.
No, I understand
he's trying
that.
to end
but he's trying to undo a lot of
international
things that otherwise he sports, by the way. I mean, this is a fairly clueless, directionless presidency. Why did he do tariffs, Margery, in light of the impact it was going to have on almost all the industrial leaders who supported him?
Because he thought he was right and everybody else was wrong.
Maybe.
Now he's having to back off because it turns out that he was wrong and they were right.
I hope I pronounced this right. Tamaya in Lowell, did I come close? Hi.
Hi, it's Tania.
Tania, I'm so sorry. My apologies. Hi.
No
Hi.
problem.
Thank you for calling.
I'm a long-time listener.
Thank you.
I've various times. Love you guys' show.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and calm myself. Everything about this administration just gets my shackles up. The whole purpose of our nation is bring your immigrants, bring yourself, bring your tired, huddled masses. And if you were to look at half of the problems in our administration, if it wasn't for the birthright, natural citizen, birthright citizenship, they would not be citizens. Their parents are immigrants. His mother's an immigrant. His grandparents. I don't understand why they. I do understand. It just makes me angry why they would try to undo the whole purpose of our nation. It's ridiculous.
Well, it is a core principle, Tania, and thank you much for another wonderful call. We really appreciate it. Again, it's enshrined in the 14th Amendment, and with all due respect to John from Westford, who's a wonderful caller, regularly gives us a call. I think it is quite established that the language means exactly what it says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. And as people like Brittany, who's a pretty big person, said, I don't like the policy, but if it's in the Constitution, it's got to be obeyed. And that is at least what guides most of us in this
Jane
country.
from Scituate says she's the third generation from Ireland. She's been tempted to self-deport since Election Day. You may be deported. I mean, that is a good question. If you don't know if your parents or grandparents became citizens, what does that make you?
That's it. No, it's a fine question. We haven't thought of it before, but we're not thinking about it today because we're out of time.
Okay, we are out of time. Okay, coming up after the new news, we're going to talk with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She's going to zoom in from Washington. One of her constituents, of course, is Ramesa Ozturk. She is the tough student who was abducted on the street. You may have seen it on a very disturbing video. Now she is back. We're going to talk to her about that. We're going to talk to her about student loans and what's going on in D.C. Regarding birthright citizenship and other things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Newport Mansions, presenting Richard Morris Hunt in a New Light, a new exhibition examining the architect's impact on American culture and his vision for a gilded American civilization. Opening May 30th, newportmansions.org. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, offering 2 to 3 day courses and executive certificates for professionals seeking cutting-edge business insights on innovation, cybersecurity, AI, and more. Info at executive.mit.edu. And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a program that showcases the range and beauty of ballet today, featuring works by Mikko Niisanen and Yuri Killian, now through May 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley zooms into the show to talk about the release of her constituent, Tufts PhD student Rumeysa Ozturk, after 6 or 7 weeks in ICE custody. Plus, proposed cuts to Medicaid, her new bill to stop wage garnishment for people in default of their student loans, and a ton more.
I'm Margery Eagan. Then Dr. Sarah Fortune, chair of the Department of Immunology and Infectious Diseases at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, discusses how a surprise philanthropic donation is keeping her scientific research alive despite cuts from the Trump administration. All that and 2 more things next on the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Supreme Court is weighing President Trump's challenge to birthright citizenship, the constitutional provision that guarantees citizenship to babies born in the United States. The case could determine how much power federal courts have to block President Trump's agenda to further restrict immigrant rights.
This is not a hypothetical. This is happening out there, right? Every court has ruled against you.
We've only had snap judgments on the merits. Obviously, we're fully briefing the merits in the courts of appeals, and our arguments are compelling.
Today, Justice Elena Kagan questioned Solicitor General John Sauer's defense of the Trump administration's case. NPR's Susan Davis reports on how this case factors into the president's broader agenda.
I mean, President Trump also, I think it's been a clear directive of his presidency that part of what he's doing is trying to expand the boundaries of presidential power. And it's hard not to see this executive order within that scope of getting to rewrite the Constitution.
That's NPR's Susan Davis reporting. President Trump has spoken to U.S. troops stationed at a major air base in Qatar. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump made the stop before he traveled on to the United Arab Emirates.
The Al Udeid Air Base just southwest of Doha is the largest U.S. military facility in the Middle East, housing thousands of U.S. troops.
No visit in the Gulf would be complete without stopping to salute the people who keep America safe, strong, and free.
Trump regaled the troops with a campaign-style speech with lots of stories from his time in office, including his efforts to end diversity programs. The president is on a 4-day tour of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, mixing some business deals with diplomacy as the administration works with the region to try and end conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. Franco Ordonez, Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar.
The Federal Aviation Administration says a hotline between the Pentagon and the air traffic control tower at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport has not worked since 2022. NPR's Joe Hernandez reports the revelation came after a mid-air collision near the airport killed 67 people recently.
An FAA official confirmed that the hotline between the Pentagon and the airport doesn't work, but that the FAA wasn't aware of that before the January collision. The official said the FAA was insisting it be brought back online before the military resumed flights out of the Pentagon, which were paused after another Black Hawk helicopter got too close to 2 commercial planes. The FAA says a direct access line was out due to the construction of a new tower at the Pentagon, but that the 2 facilities coordinate by phone. Joe Hernandez, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 136 points. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The highest court in Massachusetts launching an investigation into claims that a former New Bedford judge had an inappropriate relationship with a county prosecutor and favored her in court. Ben Burke has more.
Judge Douglas Darnborough resigned in 2023 after anonymous letters started circulating in his courthouse claiming he had a sexual relationship with the prosecutor. Darnborough denies the allegations, and so does the Bristol County District Attorney's Office. Still, the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts has appointed a special master to do a deeper investigation. If the allegations of a secret relationship between the judge and prosecutor are true, the findings could have a big impact in the region's courts and jails. Jim McKenna represents a client who's already appealing his conviction. McKenna praised Justice Serge Georges Jr. for appointing a special master to investigate the allegations.
Justice Georges did a great thing. He provided for a way we can get to the truth.
For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Ben Burke.
Don't look now, but a dead alligator has been found on Martha's Vineyard, and officials have questions. The Cape Cod Times reports that the alligator was found by a vineyard resident on Monday who was out walking his dog. What's even more bizarre is that the gator was missing its hide from the back of its head to the tip of its tail and was lying among the marsh near Tisbury Great Pond on the south side of the vineyard. Officials say the alligator is about 5 feet long, making it 3 to 5 years old, and according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the species typically grows about a foot per year during its first 4 to 6 years. The investigation continues. 68 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Margery Eagan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Carbon Leaf, the indie folk band. They've got a new album out, the first one in 10 years. It's their 15th studio album. We're also going to be joined by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, who can answer a lot of our legal questions. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, will be with us May 21st from 1 to 2, and the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be with us May 28th from noon to 1. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there. Congresswoman Pressley is going to join us in a minute, and we'll obviously take her the second she zooms in. Can I repeat what I said to Chuck before? You know this. When I was a young lawyer at South Bronx Legal Services, a coworker of mine, Elizabeth Koob, and I did a case around due process rights for prisoners at a women's prison in upstate New York, where around disciplinary proceedings.
Well, that was the place where the diet doctor killer
That's exactly
was.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Dr. Tarnow.
Jean
Tarnow, or whatever it was. Killed the diet doc.
She killed the diet doc.
Whatever it was. And she became a mentor to virtually every young woman in that prison. It was called Bedford Hills, by the way.
Bedford Hills.
But in any case, putting that aside, so our case went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and I was all excited about it. And I was really disappointed when the decision was made that Liz would argue before the Supreme Court. I'd go with her, but I would essentially be there to carry the cases, and she would do all the oral argument. I want to repeat what I said before. Even though I knew I didn't have to answer the questions, the intellect of virtually all of the Supreme Court justice and the speed with which they ask questions. And by the way, you can't finish your sentence. It is maybe the most terrifying experience I've ever had, and it was rekindled when we were listening to the oral arguments.
Yeah.
The Solicitor General
General
for
kept
Trump.
interrupting Sauer.
Oh,
it was great.
God. It's not even enough time to think. So I have to say, regardless of what side you're on in this particular case, it is really a
isn't that what you want? I mean, you definitely want to have the best legal minds going.
Well, we don't have all the best legal minds. There are a lot of really great legal minds there. No, I'm serious. But it was absolutely terrifying. So you got to give credit to these people who are able to do it. We're going to be joined in a second by Congresswoman Pressley. And as Margery said earlier, of particular interest, there are a lot of things, but Rumeysa Ozturk, who you all saw kidnapped off the streets of Somerville, was shipped to Louisiana, ultimately freed last week, I guess it was, earlier this week. She was visited in prison by Congresswoman Pressley and some other members of Congress, including Senator Markey. I think Jim McGovern was there too. And she was with Senator Markey to greet Ozturk when she landed at Logan the other day. So we're interested to hear about those experiences. We'll talk more about ICE stuff. One of the issues that Ayanna Pressley is most engaged in with Elizabeth Warren was student loan forgiveness. We know what's happening to that. She's got some sort of an antidote. She's also co-chair of the Haiti caucus. And I think you probably read yesterday the temporary protected status for Haitians in this country is about to be revoked, which puts them in a hell of a spot in a country that is awash in violence and all those sort of things. So we'll talk to her about those things too. She is joining us now on Zoom. She's Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She represents Massachusetts' 7th Congressional Districts. Congresswoman, it's good to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be with you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congresswoman. So we mentioned before you came on that one of your constituents is Rumeysa Ozturk that was sent off to that Louisiana facility after she was what looked like a kidnapping off the streets of Somerville. But you not only went down to Louisiana to see her, you were at Logan Airport when she came back from Louisiana. So tell us about those experiences.
Yeah, well, first, I went because this is something that I've done many times before, which is the check on the welfare and well-being of people in our carceral settings, whether it's our prisons, our jails, or our detention facilities. And I do just want to make that point because there's some people who have been watching this and wondering why they should care about this. If you care about mass incarceration, you should care about mass deportation. This is a for-profit system. And the same way that for-profit prisons benefit from mass incarceration, for-profit detention facilities, these are owned by, billion-dollar corporations, they benefit from mass deportation. And so I went to conduct some real-time oversight and, again, to do work that I've done for a long time in our carceral settings. I went because Rumeysa is my constituent, and I went because I'm a human being who gives a damn about another human being who is a member of our Somerville community, my constituent, who loves this country and whose constitutional rights of due process were denied. And the video was harrowing. And the only thing more harrowing than the video is what she experienced in that abduction as she was taken nearly, well over 1,000 miles away from home and ripped away from the community that she loves. When I arrived, I have to just say what I was immediately taken by is Rumeysa's gentle spirit, also that she was wearing the same hijab that she was wearing when she was abducted. She was, well aware that I was there with Senator Markey and Congressman McGovern and the ranking member, Benny Thompson of Homeland Security, and then Louisiana Congressman Troy Carter, that we had traveled, maybe some 16 hours one way to rural Louisiana to this Brazil facility to check on her and to let her know that we had not forgotten about her. But she spent the time not making appeals for herself, but she spent the time advocating for the women that are detained at that facility with her, telling stories of women battling cancer and not getting adequate treatment, women there that are pregnant, who I met, because I also spent time with about 15 women in one of the dormitories there, and they were visibly shaking, they were crying. They told stories of, improper food and nutrition, sleep deprivation, frigid temperatures without any reprieve, inadequate medical care. Rumeysa shared similar stories. Her hijab was removed without consent by one of the nurses there. Rumeysa is a severe asthmatic. And so when she was denied due process and abducted and taken away, she didn't have her two medications that she uses every day to manage her asthma. And so she had several severe asthma attacks while at the Bazille Detention Facility in Louisiana, and again, inadequate medical care. And one story that just speaks to how degrading the environment is, she had to advocate and make an appeal for some 3 days just for toilet tissue. So a very, inhumane, degrading experience. And I was really struck by how in the midst of all of that, there was no callousness. She spoke of her love for the Somerville community and talked about how when she was put into the vehicle, first she was handcuffed, eventually she shackled in the midst of this harrowing journey across multiple state lines. But when she got into the vehicle, she looked up and saw that someone was filming. And she said it was a neighbor, someone she didn't know, but she immediately was comforted by that, to know that someone was filming, that someone had heard her scream, that someone cared enough to film. And then they put their hand to the window, and she felt immediately comforted by that. And then I'll just end by saying, early in our conversation, and we spoke for probably close to 2 hours, and early in our conversation, she said, "Thank you for being here. The women here feared that God had forgotten about them,
Oh my God.
that the world had forgotten about them. So thank you for being here." And I was carrying in my hand a polished, it's sort of a thing in my family. Jim, I'm an Aquarius and Marjorie. So, I can be a little, hokey or sentimental, I suppose. But there are these polished, stones with a word, like an affirming engraved, and we gift them to people, spontaneously. But always with intention. And so I carried 2 stones because I also went to see Mahmoud Khalil, who I spent over an hour at the Gina facility before traveling to Bazil to see Rumeysa. And I had a polished stone for Mahmoud that just had the word courage. And then for Rumeysa, it was the word hope. And ultimately, after I saw the conditions, I decided to not gift them with the stones for fear that they would be confiscated. And so I was so happy when I saw Rumeysa. I just immediately burst into the room and I said, my sister, our sister. And of course, our fight is not over, for Rumeysa. So I placed that stone in the palm of her hand to encourage her to continue to keep that hope while we continue the fight of having her visa reinstated and the fight for her freedom, because this was just a victory for due process. It was a victory for due process. It was a victory for democracy. And again, Rumeysa Ozturk has no criminal record, and she's been charged with no crime.
When you say, Congresswoman, the fight is not over, I think you're referring to Ozturk, but I'm sure you're referring also to the larger fight. And we're in a state, we were talking yesterday about the Rolling Stones story that says after that incredibly scary incident in Worcester, Rolling Stone is reporting that ICE used a daughter and a baby to lure the woman out of the house because they didn't have a warrant to go in the house to grab her. We know what's going on in New Bedford, all these places around the state. And I have to say, we've searched long and hard to find state leaders, including members of Congress, you sort of stand out here, who have been loud and clear about how this is not to be tolerated in a state like Massachusetts. And we haven't seen any of it. Are you troubled by the lack of public leader outrage about these ICE behaviors in our state?
The leadership that I've been buoyed by and heartened by is that of the general public. I mean, here's Rumeysa, a member of a diverse, tight, close-knit, dense community. And there was such immediate public outcry, but it wasn't limited there. I mean, as I navigate the halls and corridors of Congress, many members from our Democratic caucus were stopping me and asking me, what is going on with Rumeysa? How can we help? And I knew that my district would be one of the hardest hit by the hostilities of this administration, given the demographics and the makeup of it. And so we have had ICE raids in Randolph and in Chelsea and in Somerville. And the point here, because Donald Trump is a dictator, the point here is to silence dissenting voices. What Donald Trump wants is a democracy, he does not want democracy. He wants a citizenry that is ignorant and uninformed. He wants a citizenry that is indifferent to the suffering of their neighbors. And he wants a citizenry that is inactive. And so the fact that, hundreds of people were taking to the streets, applying that pressure, that myself, and if there's one note that I would like, is to pay attention to the number of members of the Congressional Black Caucus that continue to put their bodies on the line. If you look at what just happened in Newark with
the mayor there,
with the mayor and 2 members of the CBC and also a member of the CHC, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus. But, I think the point here is that we understand that our destinies are tied and that any person of conscience should find it deeply disturbing that people's constitutional rights of due process are being denied and that they are being intimidated from exercising free speech.
So why are we all, when you say, as you probably are aware, we only have one member of the Congressional Black Caucus, as far as I know, in Massachusetts. You're smiling. I think you agree with that. You're avoiding the question with all due respect. Where are our leaders? Why are they not up in arms? Why are there not press conferences condemning ICE, maybe condemning police departments, or at least cautioning police departments like the one in Worcester? I haven't heard it. Have you?
Well, I mean, again, I have worked closely with a number of members in our delegation on this issue. Senator Warren, Senator Markey, Rep. McGovern. So, that hasn't been my experience.
Okay.
I mean, I'm so fortunate to be in this delegation, and it's my experience that the majority understands that even if they disagree with the op-ed that Rumeysa wrote, and so let me just name that again. Rumeysa Ozturk has no criminal record. She's a PhD student at Tufts, a qualified researcher studying child development. Child development, who came went to our meeting in this, sterile, cold detention facility with papers neatly folded with copious, neatly written notes telling the stories of dozens of women and the inhumane treatment that they had experienced. And even when we saw her at Logan Airport, her response was, please do not forget about the women that I left. It's sort of we're still in the fight for Rumeysa for her freedom, but it was sort of even a survivor's remorse. Like, I'm grateful that I'm no longer there, but please do not forget about my sisters that have been left behind. So my experience, Jim, has been that even if people disagree with Rumeysa Ozturk, my opinion is that our destinies are tied as Americans, Israelis, and Palestinians. This is just a matter for anyone who calls this country home, any person of conscience. It's about due process, constitutional rights, and free speech. Donald Trump is a dictator who wants to silence people. And the only way to beat a dictator is with defiance. And so we need defiance from our colleges and universities. We need defiance from our elected officials at every level. And we need defiance from community members who recognize that this could be you tomorrow. This is not, women are always accused, some sort of histrionics and, we're being hyperbolic. No, this could be anybody. It could be you tomorrow for reading a banned book, you tomorrow for suffering a miscarriage, you tomorrow for practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Whatever is on the opposing worldview side of Donald Trump, this dictator, is being criminalized.
We're talking to Ayanna Pressley.
So people can hear her in her own words, I just want to play some sound of Rumeysa Ozturk, which she had to say to members of the press during a press conference a couple of days ago after she was released from a Vermont detention center. Here she is.
America is the greatest democracy in the world, and I believe in those values that we share. I have faith in the American system of justice. This has been very difficult time for me, for my community at Tufts, at Turkey. But I'm so grateful for all the support, kindness, and care.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be so kind about the democracy after what the democracy did to me. But I just have one quick question before we move on from this, Congresswoman. I don't understand why in a detention facility, I mean, I know situations in prisons are not that great in general, but it does seem incredible that when you were suffering from asthma attacks, which can kill you, and you're freezing at night, why can't we have enough blankets? And why would you not intervene in an asthma attack? Is this the way our detention facilities are run in general? Is this Louisiana, or what are we to think?
That's a great question. I was going to speak about, the word is escaping me, but the forum shopping, okay?
Yes, okay.
Why Rumeysa was, unlawfully abducted and then taken to Louisiana of all places, not Vermont, not remained in Massachusetts, is because Louisiana is known at the Bazille facility that we went to conduct that real-time oversight, has a long history of human rights violation.
Okay.
So these are systemic challenges. And in fact, Louisiana is one of the most incarcerated states in the country. So they are disappeared and taken there on purpose. And Rumeysa and with Mahmoud, because I also spoke with men outside of Mahmoud at that facility. And when you ask people where they were from, Mahmoud was the only one that was not from the South.
Okay.
Similarly with Rumeysa. So they were targeted and specifically taken there. And I want to say this, a lot of them don't know why they're there. They cannot get legal counsel, because if they call legal counsel and ask to be represented, and they find out you're calling from Gina, or you're calling from Brazil, that you're calling from Louisiana, they will hang up on you because it is just so unlikely and improbable that you will get your day in court and any sort of justice. Last thing I want to say about Mahmoud, who had been denied the opportunity to see his first child born. And again, he's been charged with no crime. He said that he had lived in Syria under Assad and that he knows what an authoritarian regime looks and feels like. And that's exactly what this is.
So I'm going to conflate two topics that don't really belong together. And the only reason I'm conflating them is one, for time, and two, because you've been a leader on both. Trump is after student loan forgiveness that you and Senator Warren were leaders on. You're also co-chair of the Haiti caucus, and we know that the government is attempting to dump temporary protected status for Haitians and have them go back home, even though, as far as I know, you can't even get a flight into Haiti because the conditions are so horrible there. On student loan forgiveness and Haiti, what are you doing to fight back against the Trump administration's efforts, Congresswoman?
Oh, gosh, I don't know how to get at this quickly, Jim. Okay, so really quickly on student loan debt, people may recall that myself and others fought really hard for a pause on student loan payments during the pandemic. That carried over under the Biden administration. There were numerous extensions. And then they restarted the repayment system with a 12-month grace period that wouldn't affect anybody's, as people were getting back into it, that wouldn't be reported if people tripped up on that. Many people don't even know that their loans have been defaulted on, that the system has resumed repayment and they have not resumed payments. If you have not paid on your loan for 9 months or longer, your loan is in default. And so now the Trump administration is threatening wage garnishment. And so what that means for 5 million borrowers at minimum that are already in default and millions more that are on the brink of defaulting is that your hard-earned Social Security check, your tax refund, that they could seize either of those and that your wages could be garnished. And the fact that this is happening at a time of great economic instability and destabilization because of Donald Trump and his policies, because of these tempered tariffs, so Donald Trump is coming for your health care. He's coming for your food if you're, hungry and in need. And now he's coming for your hard-earned benefits and your money. Here. So your wages. So myself and Senator Booker and Warren have introduced the Ending Administrative Garnishment Act, Ending Administrative Wage Garnishment Act, to suspend and remove the tool of garnishment because it is cruel. It has a disparate impact on those families that have the greatest need for every dollar. And the other thing I'd say, just to close this out on the student debt piece, Jim, is that Donald Trump not only wants to roll back the progress that was made on student loan debt, but they also want to dismantle the Department of Education. Now, dismantling the Department of Education technically requires an act of Congress, but they can degrade it to the point that it's impotent. And so for the millions of borrowers out there that are wondering, what do I owe? Is my loan in default? I need answers. When you have laid off 50% of a workforce at the Department of Education, and people might be eligible for an income-driven repayment program, or maybe they're still in forbearance and they're not even, in default. They don't know, and they can't reach anyone. God help you trying to talk to a loan service provider. You could be on the phone for 12 hours with some of these service providers. And now if you try to get help from the Department of Education, you will likely not be able to reach anyone there. So I want to encourage borrowers, if you have a question about the status of your loans, you need to go to the Student Borrower Protection Center, go to their website, and they can help you to navigate. You can also call my congressional office for guidance. On the issue of Haiti, yes, that's been a long-standing fight. I co-chair the House Haiti Caucus, represent the third largest Haitian diaspora in the country. I believe the Trump administration is anti-Blackness on steroids, and that does not have any geographical limitations. And so we see the most, weaponized policies and cruelty when it comes to the people of Haiti. And to send anyone back to Haiti into Port-au-Prince is nothing short of a death sentence.
Talking to Ayanna Pressley.
You know, one last thing, Congresswoman, because I know your time is short. Jake Tapper, a journalist for CNN, just wrote a book talking about Joe Biden and how so many people that were around Joe Biden, members of his cabinet, knew he was in failing cognitive decline, let's put it that way. What do the Democrats do about this? I mean, if this is that people knew and didn't say anything until the American people saw his debate.
You know, Marjorie, Jim asked earlier sort of what's informing what issues members take on and don't take on. We are the strategy of this administration is to flood the zone and is to overwhelm us. I believe right now what we need to be focused on is not how we weather the next 4 years, but the acknowledgement that what is happening in this moment will shape and determine the next 100 years. So I say all that to say that our plate is full. We need to be focused on all the ways in which this hostile administration in the midst of an active government takeover, what we need to do to blunt those harms while advancing an affirmative vision for this country. And just to get to the point about the midterms and elections and things like that, Democrats need to do three things. First of all, we need to make the Republicans wear all the harm. We're doing that right now with this budget fight, and it is a fight. We cannot act as if any of these things are inevitabilities. We have to resist and reject them at every turn. We have a discharge petition to force a vote in the House called Hands Off Medicaid and SNAP. For these Republicans that continue to say that they would never vote to cut Medicaid or Social Security, even though we see that actively happening in this budget fight, we're forcing a vote. We have to make the Republicans wear the harm. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we have to do the things that we're doing now. Stop the oligarchy tour. Democrats going into Republican districts and doing town halls, litigation, legislation, agitation, mobilization. And then we need to not just blunt the harms, but advance an affirmative vision for things like universal child care, paid leave, reparations. So, Jim, if you want to know what is the internal, not conflict, but debate where there's not always unanimity here, is that some people believe we should be moderating our aspirations. And I disagree. I think the message that the electorate sent is that Democrats win when we deliver, when people feel the impact of our policies. And I think we need to advance policies that go as deep and as bold as the herd. We lost the youth vote. I don't want to talk about the Biden presidency. I want to talk about how we become the party of the future, that we are not living in the past. We're not relitigating the past, but that we are the party of the future because we lost the youth vote. They didn't go Republican, but they stayed home.
But with all due respect, Congressman, if I can, I know you only have 30 seconds. Yeah. It seems to me when even Democrats say they're not crazy about Democrats, it's not relitigating the Biden presidency. It's making sure that the voters know that they can trust Democrats to tell them the truth.
Yeah. I got you. Listen, I appreciate that. And I do, Marjorie, I appreciate that. And thank you for, offering that clarifying point, Jim. Look, I think this is the season of call a thing a thing. And so, that is how you rebuild trust. So it's not the Republicans communicate in headlines, Democrats communicate in slide decks. We've got to unlearn that. And so what happens is someone's at home and you're asked some question and you guys know, you know a pivot clearly and folks are capitulating and, worried about, hurting feelings or, something becoming a headline in a story that they don't want to. It's a delicate dance here, but we're actually not we're not supposed to be communicating when we talk to the public, to our colleagues. We're supposed to be talking to the public. Yeah. So, so I think it's a fair point, and there's, work to be done to, I think people are cynical about government, period, right now. There's a real deficit of trust. It's not unique to Washington. It might be worse, but I think that is an issue writ large. That's systemic.
Now, before you go, I just looked it up. I'm a Taurus. And Taurus and Aquarius are considered a mixed bag in astrology. So next time you're here, we'll work on this. Is that okay?
That's not true, but get along famously. Marjorie, what is your sign?
I'm Gemini. I don't know what I'm
Listen to
doing.
her.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm here, I'm there.
We get along famously. Yeah. So it's wonderful to be with you all.
We
and
agree. Congresswoman, thanks. Soon again, we hope. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very, very much for being with us, Congresswoman. We really appreciate you taking the time. We have been speaking with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She represents Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk with Harvard scientist Dr. Sarah Fortune, whose life-saving tuberculosis research was halted by the Trump administration funding cuts to the university. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Great Recession sent the world's economy into a tailspin.
2.6 million jobs were cut from the economy.
Birth rates have dropped to their lowest annual level.
Fewer babies in 2008
means fewer college students 18 years later in 2026. I'm Kirk Carapezza from GBH News.
And I'm John Marcus from the Hechinger Report.
On the new season of College Uncovered, we look over the edge of the demographic cliff.
Listen to College Uncovered wherever you get your podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Direct Tire and Auto Service, offering a full range of services, including brakes, shocks, diagnostics, and AC work. Direct Tire and Auto Service. Not just service, customer service. DirectTire.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Braude. She's Margery Eagan. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General joins us for an hour on May 21st at the library. Mayor Wu joins us for an hour on May 28th at the library. Just hours after the Trump administration's anti-Semitism task force said it would freeze more than $2 billion of funding to the university for not complying with its long list of deranged demands. This is Harvard we're talking about, where the demands were placed. Our next guest received an email from the NIH telling her to stop work immediately. Her work is $60 million of international research project on tuberculosis, a bacterial infection that still is deadly throughout the world. Here now on Zoom to talk about the whole mess and hopefully the future is Dr. Sarah Fortune. She's a professor of immunology and infectious diseases at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Doctor, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Ditto on what Jim said, but elaborate on what Jim said a little bit. Before the hammer came down from the federal government, what exactly were you doing about tuberculosis and why was it so important?
So I was running one of the moonshot programs to try to understand protection from tuberculosis infection. So TB infects about a third of the world. It's the leading infectious cause of death. And we don't understand actually what differentiates people who are infected and are going to do fine and those who are going to get sick and die. And that is a fundamental question in terms of understanding where we should target interventions like treatment or vaccination. And so the NIH had launched this moonshot project about 6 years ago, and our program was 21 labs in 14 institutions to try to identify these basic signals of protection versus disease.
Now, Dr. Fortune, while I understand how deadly and widespread this disease is around the world, I'm embarrassed to admit I thought it had been pretty much eradicated in the United States.
So lie.
But I was wrong, apparently.
Yep.
Am I not? Tell us.
Wrong. And in fact, actually, one of the interesting things about the fallout of the original stop work order on my program is how many programs, TB control programs, I've heard from around the country, just emphasizing the importance of getting the message out that there's still TB everywhere in the United States, and And many people are unaware that it is still a domestic problem as well as an international problem.
So when this shutdown came, before we get to a little bit of good news, that meant that the labs are going to close. People weren't going to get paid. You had to go out and find another job, or if you.
Well, we don't know about that yet. We'll find out in a second.
Not you, but I mean, when you're shutting these places down, that's people's livelihoods in addition to the very important research. So this is like a massive shock.
It is a massive shock. I mean, obviously, it's a massive shock that is playing out through Harvard today.
Yes.
But it is definitely a massive shock because there were probably 60 people in this program for whom the funding just was there one day and disappeared the next.
Can you talk about that day? I've seen you do interviews, and I read a Globe story on this and a few others. But even though I assume, well, I don't know, I shouldn't assume that you knew this was coming. What was that moment like when you got this note? I think was that April 15th? Am I right about that? I think it was.
It was April 15th.
What was that like?
The massive shock was the week before when the Globe had contacted me to say that this program was at the top of the list of contracts under consideration or by the administration in the negotiation with Harvard. And that was a shock. To be at the top of the list in terms of contracts under threat, that was a gut punch, because in a way you think you're safe if you're working on sort of a global infectious disease of clear importance that you think that's going to skate under the political radar.
So why were you at the top of the list? You said something good about a person of color 4 years ago, or what sin did you commit to get you to the top of the list?
I think it's a very large contract, actually.
Oh, $60 million bucks.
$60 million bucks.
Can you tell the story? You know, Marjorie's concerned about the human cost here. She doesn't, obviously, the human cost on people who have the disease or could have the disease, but she was mentioning before the workers who you were involved in. When I read the original stories about, I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it macaques? Is that how you say it?
The monkeys.
Macaques, yeah.
Macaques, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is the little bit of good news, at least the good news that we're aware of, and maybe more we'll talk to you about in a second. Tell us what originally you thought you had to do, and then thanks to a grant from Open Philanthropy, what you were able to do.
This program involves the study of tuberculosis in people, and we have several human cohorts in South Africa and Uganda, and in animal models. That included non-human primates, where we have the only model of really highly effective vaccine protection against TB, and then small animals. And we have a non-human primate study that was ongoing, that we had just finished vaccinating the animals, and the stop in funding really threatened our ability to continue that study. And so it was a existential threat for the non-human primate study, in terms of, were we going to be able to continue that study, or were we going to have to prematurely euthanize the animals?
And then this grant came
of these networks. You decimate the web of biomedical research. So, for example, my study was 21 labs and 14 institutions. When the funding was cut to Harvard, it cut the funding to all of those other institutions. And that is playing out across the biomedical community at Harvard these days. So all of the Harvard grants that went to the Dana-Farber around cancer, for example, those terminated.
Yeah.
You know, grants from the School of Public Health that went to understanding air pollution, terminated, right? So those are whole networks that are destroyed through the action of targeting Harvard.
But you supported what Harvard did by resisting, from what I understand. Is that not correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
One of our colleagues asked a wonderful question. Wants us to ask you a wonderful question. What do you tell young scientists and students who are just starting their careers about? Well, I know you won't know what the end of the sentence is. What do you tell those young people?
I tell them what they do is important, and I tell them that actually some of the power in what they do is evident by the ferocity of the attacks on the institution. So not that it makes it easier, but there is real power in knowledge. There is real power in research, and it matters.
Dr. Fortune, we had Dr. Fauci in here a year or two ago, and I think when one of us asked him a question about whether he was concerned about the anti-science movement, for lack of a better expression, in this country, he seemed to well up to me. He was on Zoom, so I may be reading more into it. But there is this anti-science bent. I mean, and in anticipation of you, Margie and I were talking, it seems to me there is this war on public health that is intense. What do you worry about down the line, beyond the horror that your own work is suffering from, hopefully to recover, we'll see.
Yeah.
What do you worry is the future for public health, for science-based decision-making in this country? What do you worry about?
I worry about the future of science-based decision-making. Actually, what you just said it captures it perfectly. Medical decision-making and public health decision-making, we do not lead the world in health indicators.
Yeah.
We have a broken health system, but actually turning away from data in terms of trying to better health is a disastrous mistake.
One last thing from me, Doctor, is where do you see the state of research 4 years from now, assuming that none of these monies are gotten back?
I think there's a question about the state of research at Harvard and the state of research more broadly, but I envision a world. So I'm a little bit of an optimist in the long term, a long-term optimist, short-term pessimist, long-term optimist. And I think that we have to use this moment to transform how we do science. And there have been inefficiencies. We've been happy to do things a little more slowly than we should be doing things, and that this is the moment when we're going to actually have to figure out how to do really high impact, sophisticated science with less resources. And I think fundamentally that means we're going to have to share more. We're going to have to work cooperatively. We're going to have to focus, but we can't pivot away from science in terms of driving health innovation.
Two more quick things before we go. What happens to tuberculosis in the short run, to use your time frame division? What happens?
Well, it depends if you're a fan of the bacterium or the people. So I think in the short term, actually, we're going to see rising TB cases. We see rising TB cases domestically. We're going to see loss of TB control internationally. We see rising drug resistance. It's not good.
And 1 million people, 1 million people are dying globally a year? Is that the number that's accepted?
A little bit more. Between like 1.3, yeah.
So before you go, final question. You said a minute ago, if I had met you a year ago and said, you're going to be on our show and you're going to say, data should drive our decisions, would you believe those words would ever have to come out of your mouth? I mean, it really is, it's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. Actually, the vindictiveness of the attacks on science are sort of what's unbelievable. It would not have surprised me that there would have been a loss of enthusiasm, a sort of exhaustion with science, but the whole-scale attack on science astonishes me.
Well, we wish you success in the future, Doctor, and really appreciate your speaking out. It really is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And
we do too.
Let's hope things somehow
turn around.
Well,
she says she's a long-term optimist.
Yeah.
May the long term come soon, Doctor. That's all we're saying here. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for being with us. We've been speaking with Dr. Sarah Fortune. She's a professor of immunology and infectious diseases at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And we thank Dr. Fortune again for taking the time to be with us. Coming up after a quick break, two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
That's a horror.
In the new sitcom Overcompensating, comedian Benito Skinner plays a version of himself as a closeted college student.
At any given point in the closet, there were all these things in my head that I thought, they're going to know. And if I do this, then they're going to know. And it's all going to crumble down and I'm going to have to come out.
I'm Ari Shapiro, turning old wounds into comedy on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Margery Eagan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow. Two more things is back. We couldn't do it during the pledge breaks. And it's perfect. We talked to a health researcher, public health researcher. Then we're going to talk to Jon Gruber about the attacks on research at universities and why we should care about it. In a few minutes, and sandwiched in between, we're going to talk about the chief health official in the United States. You want to go, Margery?
No, you're going
first. Oh, you
first.
want me to go
Yes,
first?
I do.
Okay. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. proved yet again yesterday, this is in hearings before Congress, why he should stick to dropping dead bears off in Central Park rather than running Health and Human Services. Early on in this hearing, he says, I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me. And while I would agree, they do, because he runs the country's chief health secretariat. When asked by a committee member if he'd vaccinate his own kids against measles, he said, probably. That's leadership for you, I'll tell you. When he's asked to affirmatively promote the measles vaccine, the anti-vax activist, that's RFK Jr., despite what he says I won't promote something as safe and effective if there are issues. Except it is safe and effective, and there are no issues. That's me speaking. Just as there are none with, for example, the abortion pill, mifepristone. Safe, proven safe for how many years was it? 26 or 27 years, though Kennedy says he will still do a complete review of the drug, making his boss happy, I guess. I don't know why else. My favorite part was when he invokes his son, saying his son was badly affected by long COVID, and his cousin, Maria Shriver, who's done fabulous work on Alzheimer's. He fails to mention, after praising them, that research on both Alzheimer's and long COVID has been cut. You know who was cut by? Him, exactly.
Yeah, you seem confused.
Finally, here is Louisiana Senator and medical doctor Bill Cassidy. You'll remember him. He was the key vote that allowed RFK to be elevated to Secretary of Health and Human Services. Here he is, that key vote, Louisiana Senator and Dr. Cassidy, correcting what Kennedy had to say. Listen.
The Secretary made the statement that no vaccines except for COVID have been evaluated against placebo. For the record, that's not true. Rotavirus, measles, and HPV vaccines have been, and some vaccines are tested against previous versions. So just for the record, to set that straight.
Just for the record, uninformed, biased, hypocritical, and according to his cousin Caroline Kennedy, a predator. That is America's Health Secretary, RFK Jr. What are you talking about?
Well, our America's Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has given us possibly a new Surgeon General, Dr. Casey Means. Mm-hmm. And she has just written this book in which she said that we should all consider using psychedelic drugs as therapy, particularly magic mushrooms, which helped her find a romantic partner. Here's what Casey Means had to say. She said, she was inspired by, quote, an internal voice that whispered, it's time to prepare. I felt myself as part of an infinite and unbroken series of cosmic nesting dolls.
I can see you saying this
of
a few years
millions
ago.
of mothers and babies before me from the beginning of life. Mm-hmm. And psilocybin can be a doorway to a different reality, which I'm sure in her case it probably has been a doorway to a different reality. But the problem is, you want your Surgeon General, I think generally speaking, to be a little bit more buttoned up, you know, like Obama's and Biden's Vivek Murthy. He was concerned about e-cigarettes and loneliness. And then before that,
social media for kids.
That's right. You had the Surgeon General under George W. Bush. He was also worried about secondhand smoke. You did have somebody who's a little bit out of the box for Surgeon Generals. That was Jocelyn Elders. Remember, she was with Bill Clinton.
Oh, she the one that talked about, you know what?
Yeah, they called her the condom queen. Certain irony there. She was Bill Clinton's Surgeon General. And then she, advocated that kids in school should be masturbating more.
She did.
But you could say one thing for masturbation. At least it's been studied extensively down through the years by billions of Americans.
Fine.
They've not found any adverse effects, I don't think, from the practice.
From it,
I think magic mushrooms a little bit more up in the ether in terms of what they actually do. And so I'm not sure that we got RF Kennedy Jr. running the whole thing. And then we've got Casey Means with the psilocybin mushrooms as the Surgeon General. I'm not sure where we're headed, Jim, but I don't think it's good on the public health front.
I can agree with you on that.
All right.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio,
89.7
GBH. Right after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to come back here. We're going to be joined by Jon Gruber, who's going to talk to us about the economy and the impact of Trump's attacks on what we just talked to Sarah Fortune about, higher education research, all the disease research which goes on right here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Our recent membership drive was a success. Your support is so appreciated. Today's news is on the air because you helped us get it there, and we know we all need to stay informed more than ever. So thank you from all of us at GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Johnson & Wales University, committed to going beyond the classroom by helping students develop networks, obtain real-world experience, and providing hands-on learning that makes an impact. More at jwu.edu. And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. MIT economist Jon Gruber joins us to get into the nitty-gritty of Trump's attacks on higher ed. Gruber says it takes three forms: petty grievances under the guise of DEI and faux concern for anti-Semitism, reduction of research support, and the endowment tax. The broader economic impact from all this, all of our living standards will suffer, especially in Massachusetts. Gruber makes that case.
I'm Margery Eagan. Then, of course, it's Thursday. Am I the a-hole day? Today's prompt comes from a husband fed up with his sailor-mouthed wife. He doesn't want to be around her in public anymore. Her swearing embarrasses him. Should she moderate her tone, or should he keep being such a prude? Sounds like they need couples therapy. Weigh in next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. Supreme Court is weighing arguments surrounding the Trump administration's bid to end birthright citizenship. The case challenges the constitutional provision that guarantees automatic citizenship to all babies born on U.S. soil. Today, the arguments also focused on the question of whether federal district court judges can rule against the Trump administration on a nationwide basis. Jeremy Feigenbaum, New Jersey's Solicitor General, represents the state and local governments in the case.
Its argument that a single district court cannot decide birthright citizenship, or that we need more percolation on that question for the nation, overlooks that this court already settled this exact constitutional question 127 years ago, and that this EO is contrary to over a century of executive practice.
That's Jeremy Feigenbaum addressing the nation's top court. NPR's Joel Rose reports a new poll shows a majority of Americans oppose President Trump's push to end birthright citizenship.
The NPR Ipsos poll finds that fewer than a third of Americans want to end birthright citizenship. But the poll also finds that other parts of the White House's immigration crackdown do have broader support. For example, President Trump's push to quickly deport alleged gang members without giving them a chance to contest those allegations under an 18th century wartime law called the Alien Enemies Act. Almost half of poll respondents say they're in favor of that. 40% of Americans support President Trump's push for mass deportation of everyone in the country without legal status, a slight drop from 44% support 3 months ago. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
For the first time, doctors have treated a baby born with a rare but devastating genetic disorder with a gene editing therapy tailored to his specific condition. NPR's Rob Stein has more on this medical milestone.
The baby was born at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in August with a genetic disorder that causes toxic ammonia to build up in his body. That can cause brain damage and even death. So doctors raced to tailor-make a gene-editing treatment to correct his genetic defect. And after receiving 3 infusions beginning in February, the child appears to have improved. Doctors say the baby will have to be followed for much longer to know how well the treatment ultimately works, but they hope this is the beginning of using bespoke gene-editing treatments to help children born with very rare genetic disorders. Rob Stein, NPR News.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now up nearly 200 points, or nearly 0.5%, at 42,247. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. According to new population estimates released by the United States Census Bureau today, the number of people residing in Massachusetts grew by nearly 70,000 between 2023 and 2024. This as domestic outmigration to other states slowed and the state saw record levels of international migration. The data shows that of cities and towns with populations of 50,000 or more, Revere experienced the largest percentage of population growth, and due to international migration, Boston was also able to reverse the decrease in population that occurred during the pandemic. Towns that saw decreases in population were primarily concentrated in Western Mass and Barnstable County. Estimates indicate that as of July 1, 2024, there are now 7,138,195 people living in Massachusetts. The city of Fall River has appointed its first female police chief. The Herald News reports that Kelly Furtado, who has been the interim chief, was appointed to the role for 1 year in a 5-4 city council vote. 2 votes against her were from counselors who weren't happy with the selection process, but said it had nothing to do with her qualifications. And the Celtics and Red Sox both off today. The Celtics are limping back to Fenway to host Atlanta tomorrow. Celtics keeping hope alive with Game 6 in New York also tomorrow. 68 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, Jim Braude and Margery, Eagan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
And we're at the library tomorrow, everybody.
Yes, we are.
Joined on Zoom by Jonathan Gruber. John's the chair of MIT's Department of Economics, where he also is the Ford Professor of Economics, instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform and the Affordable Care Act. That should be gone in about a week. His latest book is Jumpstarting America, How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Economic Growth and the American Dream. Hello, Jon Gruber.
Hello, Jim and Margery.
What are we talking about?
Today we're talking about science, education, and what it means for the Boston economy.
Yeah.
You know, we just got off the phone Zoom with Dr. Sarah Fortune from the Chan School of Public Health, whose $60 million tuberculosis moonshot was defunded by the federal government on April 15th. So it's a perfect segue to you, John.
So tell us what this is going to mean. It's not looking good.
It's not looking good. And I would call this the most existential threat to universities, perhaps in the entire post-war period. I mean, this is a big, big threat. I think just for background, there's 3 ways in which universities face threats right now. The one which has gotten all the press is what we call sort of, once again, I've been calling policy by petulance, which is sort of the various grievances against various universities like Harvard and Columbia under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism or ending DEI. And these, obviously, most notably at Harvard, have been incredible and really existential. There's no way Harvard can survive as a university if the federal government's going to cut off all funding to Harvard. Now, it's hard to know if these are unclear. First of all, it's hard to break existing promises to universities without a legal precedent. But certainly going forward, funding for research is the purview of the U.S. government, and if Trump administration and the Congress want to cut off funding to Harvard, they can. This is sort of a threat. It's gotten the news, but it's only one of the threats, and the other two are not getting as much attention, and are perhaps equally or maybe even more important. And the first is a broad-based reduction in research support. Okay, basically, the Trump administration has proposed to massively cut the amount of research support that goes to universities, both in terms of cutting the funding for things that make research go at universities, our labs and buildings, and second, just cutting research funding. The Trump budget proposed things like cutting the National Science Foundation by 50%, or research the Department of Energy by 60%. And those are massive hits on funding. And then third, we have the endowment tax. So let's talk about what that is, because that's going to start to be in the news more. As you know, many universities, particularly ones in Boston, have large endowments, which is basically sort of an accumulation of past gifts and their investment returns. We know Harvard has the biggest endowment in the country, probably the world, at $53 billion. But other universities have large endowments too. About 16 universities have endowments of $10 billion or more. MIT is at $24 billion. It's important to understand what these are and what they are not. They are not a piggy bank. They are not something you just tap into when times are tough to spend on things. And that's for two reasons. First of all, most gifts people make to places like Harvard and MIT are restricted. They say you need to use this for X. So you need to use this for a particular building or a particular professor or a particular project. So you can't just tap into that and use it for whatever you want when times are tough. The second is that, remember, the goal of universities is to last forever. These are gifts which are supposed to help universities function off into the distant future. And as a result, the idea is not to spend the principal, but just to spend the interest. The idea is that you have an underlying endowment, and that the interest in the endowment is what pays for you to continue doing the wonderful things you're doing. So what that means is that the endowment is not a piggy bank, and it's a fundamental source of financing for things universities do.
Like what?
So MIT, for example, a huge share of the research we do at MIT comes from the flows on our endowment. The fact that we can offer free tuition to students with families of income of less than $200,000 is funded from our endowment.
That's the same threshold at Harvard, right?
Yes.
And that comes from the endowment there too, the interest on the endowment?
Comes from the endowment as well. So the fact that we can educate some of the best students in the world, students that will go on, and this comes to the second part of our talk about economics, but students that will go on and form their own companies and keep America at the forefront of technological innovation, that graduate student funding partially comes from the endowment. Remember, it's very important to remember how graduate students are funded at places like MIT and Harvard. They're funded through research grants and through endowments. The key point is the main way a graduate student learns is not in the classroom. The main way a science graduate student learns is by being in the lab, getting their hands dirty, as it were, and actually making stuff. Mm-hmm. When you cut funding, you cut the ability for labs to have these graduate students, and therefore you cut the scientists of the future. So the endowment is critical. In the first Trump administration, there was a small tax put in, a 1.4% tax put in on the income of endowments. So in other words, once again, what I was saying, this income that funds our research, funds our tuition subsidies, funds our graduate students, there's a small tax on it. This has now been proposed to rise dramatically to 14 to 21%. That is an enormous cut in the ability of places like MIT and Harvard to do what they do. Now, this is only about 56 schools are affected, but they're some of the leading institutions in our country. And so if you add this up, if you add up the ad hoc attacks, you add up the cuts in research funding through our nation's leading institutions like the National Science Foundation and the endowment tax, you're talking about things on the order of 20 to 30% and beyond cuts in the size of the leading research institutions in America.
And that doesn't include, correct me if I'm wrong, the threat to tax-exempt status for places like Harvard. And while most legal experts believe that at the end of the day, the universities whose tax exemption is threatened will probably win, that's an iffy proposition. It's way down the line. But that would potentially dry up virtually all donations, would it not?
It's a great point, Jim. First of all, the endowment tax hurts donations. Because now, let's say you're a donor and you're deciding, do I donate to MIT or do I donate to some other worthy organization? Well, if I donate to the other worthy organization, they get to spend all the income from my donation. Yeah. If I donate to MIT, they only get to spend, 79 cents of the income.
Because of the tax, yeah.
Jon,
already that's going to make people less willing to donate to universities.
Can I ask a question about the endowments? Get back to Harvard, $53 billion, or even you guys at MIT with $25 billion. I know you said that they're earmarked and that a giver says you have to give this to X or something, but it won't solve the whole problem. But since this is an emergency and an existential threat, couldn't you go back to the giver, assuming some of them are still around, and say, can you let us off the hook here because we're going down, and more generalize the gift? Is that possible?
I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on that, what's available. But remember, Marge, remember the second point, which is very important, which is if you use the endowment to stop yourself from going down, that then shrinks the ability to continue to run your functions in the future.
Yeah.
It's not a free lunch. You then have to decide, okay, in the future, what am I not going to do? So if I'm going to take money out of my endowment to deal with this crisis, that means I'll have less income in the future to do all the things I was doing. Am I going to have fewer graduate students? Am I going to have fewer, smaller labs? Am I going to start charging tuition and more students or higher tuition? That is unavoidable. So essentially, there's no way to tap into the endowment without cutting activities at universities down.
So let's talk about the impact if these universities like Harvard and MIT get really whacked, the impact on Massachusetts.
Well, look, as has been said before, we are an eds and meds economy. A huge share of what drives the Massachusetts economy is our educational institutions and our medical institutions. In the case of Harvard, that's both. Because Harvard runs a university and a hospital system employing 18,000 people. So right there, a 30% cut to Harvard, that's a third of 18,000 people that might have to lose their positions. That's a huge effect. But it's not the real big effect. The real big effect is not who universities employ. It's the magnet they provide to the local economy. And this is discussed in my book, Jumpstarting America, with my Nobel Prize-winning co-author, Simon Johnson. We discuss the critically local nature of research. A number of studies have shown that having university in the area leads to a dramatic uptick in local economic growth. And there's no better example than right next door to me at Kendall Square. Okay, Kendall Square was a dying industrial park. In the 1970s, it literally served as a snow dump for the city of Boston. They literally dumped the extra snow there. Okay, but because of biotechnology leadership at MIT, so our faculty started companies in biotechnology, put them in Kendall Square. The result today is Kendall Square is the second most valuable real estate in the world after Manhattan. Okay, that grew out of having MIT here. All the jobs that have come from that, all the biotechnology sector jobs that, tens of thousands of jobs here just in Cambridge, not to mention the effect statewide, has been due to that tie to the university. And basically, the key thing is it starts from the research. It all starts with research and goes from there. So, for example, I love this story. One story we use in our book is the story of an MIT-based robotics research company that started at MIT, was doing some robotics research, got a grant from the military, was doing that, notice, these devices we have that can find minds can actually be used for other things, and the Roomba was born. And iRobot now employs hundreds of employees in Massachusetts because of that original link. So basically, moreover, there are basically these big spillovers. So the fact that now there's these smart people wanting to start companies, they need money. So what happens? Venture capitalists come here. Boston has no right by population to be a much bigger center of venture capital than Chicago, but it is. There's much more venture capital here than there is in Chicago, even though we're much smaller. because of our university leadership.
Yeah.
We are one of the few leading venture capital cities in the country. The venture capitalists come here and they provide the financing to grow those companies. And those companies grow, okay, they buy, that doesn't benefit the founders, that benefits everyone, okay? In the Globe story about this, they mentioned in 1 year, Harvard spent $500 million buying lab supplies from local manufacturers, many local small entrepreneurs benefiting from the lab supplies at Harvard. And as the companies grow, they have more employees, and those employees need to eat out. They need to get their hair cut. There's a huge spillover to the entire economy, okay? And essentially, this spillover exists because of this word I've used before. Remember, I said the secret I give away on the show is the reason economists are so successful is we make up fancy words for simple concepts, okay? One of those words is agglomeration, which is this notion that basically smart people want to live with smart people. And the fact that we have these universities and the leading thinkers in the technology area brings other leading thinkers in, and that's what essentially grows the Massachusetts economy.
Before you continue with this, I want to go back to what you said a minute ago, the trickle-down impact on local businesses. We talked about in the context of the tariff war with China the other day until it was temporarily put on the back burner. CNN did this great story, well, everybody did the same story, essentially, on the port of Los Angeles, which, 30% of all the imports in the world come through that port and a neighboring port. And they didn't just focus on the number of cargo ships and containers that were not coming. I think it was down 30%. But they went to the local bar, the local retailer, the whatever. And every single one of these was saying, we're a day away from being out of business because the longshoreman's not working. He or she doesn't have money to spend. So they're eating at home or they're not buying. And so the impact, even if you're not, you say to yourself, well, I don't really care about the big boys and girls. The big boys and girls, they matter in the way you've described, John, but the big boys and girls hire people that make sure that small boys and girls are able to run their businesses and make money. So it's a huge part of the story.
And look, it's ironic because it ties to another part of, we can discuss another time what's happened in fiscal policy, but in some sense, yes, it's true. The business leaders will get hurt. Meanwhile, Trump is going to cut their taxes and help them.
That's a very good point.
But the smaller guy is not getting helped. And Jim, it's not just the anecdotes. I mean, anecdotes are great for learning, but there's actually real statistical evidence. Mm-hmm. There's a very well-known economist, Enrico Moretti at Berkeley, who's shown that as cities agglomerate, as they grow and develop these technology jobs, it spills over and provides excellent new jobs, even for people without college degrees, that it grows the whole economy. This is really important. And it talks a bit about how fragile this is. That basically, look, Kendall Square was a snow dump. Kendall Square could once again be a snow dump. I mean, basically, this is once people decide the smartest people aren't in Cambridge anymore, but they're now in Chicago, then maybe everybody starts moving to Chicago and the venture capitalists start moving to Chicago. And all of a sudden, Boston isn't the hub anymore. It really is, just as we can benefit from these agglomeration, we can be punished by the agglomeration, which is once we're not the leader anymore, everybody leaves.
Well, it's also not just Boston to Chicago. I assume it's Boston to Western Europe, to China, to wherever. And it seems to me from the people with whom we've spoken, none of whom are head of the economics department at MIT, it's not so easy to reverse that. When scientists and businesses and international students go to other parts of the world and are greeted well financially and in every other way,
and schools
the notion that, Trump, a Democrat beats Trump in 4 years, sure as hell doesn't mean that all of a sudden they buy a return ticket, does it?
No, I think, so now let's widen our lens from Massachusetts to the nation. Because quite frankly, while it's bad for Massachusetts, it's very bad for the nation as well. Because in some sense, the key thing is that we remember we need to train the next generation of scientists. And if we're not training those scientists here, they'll be trained elsewhere. And we're already seeing other countries are putting out the red carpet to try to attract our best scientists and the students that they'll train. Right now you think about you're a student who's not necessarily tied to the U.S. by family or other reasons. You're thinking about graduate school. You can come to the U.S. where you might not have a lab to work in, or you might not have funding, or you can go to Europe where they're announcing new funding initiatives to take advantage of our situation, or China, which is taking scientists and saying, come here, we'll give you a huge lab, we'll give you a bunch of employees. We are advancing in science, not stepping backwards.
Are you seeing this already, by the way, as opposed to in theory?
I'm seeing anecdotally. We're certainly hearing anecdotes of graduate students in economics, which is what I'm following, not in other fields, not wanting to come to America, but wanting to study elsewhere. Now, it's hard to separate that from the general anti-international backlash. So it's hard to know how much that is due to funding cuts. But basically, they work hand in hand, which is basically we benefit as a nation when we attract the brightest minds. The brightest minds come here, they invent stuff. That stuff results in new companies starting in America. Where things get invented is where the jobs land. It's very sticky. Okay, there's a great example. If you look at the development of cell phones, where did the idea of cellular phones really pick up? In Finland, of all places, with Nokia, right? And Finland invented 2G, and out of nowhere, Finland becomes huge. Then Japan takes over and does 3G. Finland goes down in Japan. It's a huge boom. Then we really took over on 4G, and it was a huge boom for the US. Basically, where these new technologies are invented, jobs follow. And the new technologies are invented where universities provide the basic research and then trade the scientists of tomorrow. And that's why these attacks are really an attack on our long-run national growth. And Jim, you're right. This is not something you quickly reverse. You don't quickly say, oh, fine. It's not like some things which, the next administration can just come in and reverse. These are devastating long-run changes to our growth rate as a country.
So you said at the beginning, Jon, that Harvard can't survive if these cuts stand. So what does that mean?
Well, look, I know Alan Garber. He's actually a health economist like myself and a wonderful guy. I've known him for years, and I trust him to figure it out. I don't know what Harvard's going to do. Obviously, Harvard could survive as an institution. It would just be a very different institution that didn't do research. Remember, it started as a divinity school. My wife went to the Harvard Divinity School, which is the oldest part of Harvard. It could shrink back to being a divinity school again. But basically, the point is that the way Harvard's changing the world most, I would argue, is through the incredible research leadership it provides and the medical leadership it provides. And those are massively under threat. And I'm honest, I don't know how Harvard, in anything like its current form, survives. Federal government says it won't give you any funding.
When you think about it, you go to Mass General, you go to Brigham, you go to it's a Harvard teaching hospital, and that's how you think of it. You think of people come here from all over the world to go to our hospitals because they have led the world, and that's all shaky too now.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. This is the challenge for universities. We've not covered ourselves in glory in terms of making sure everybody understands our centrality to the U.S. economy.
Right.
I think the elite universities are viewed as elite and out of touch, and I think some of those wounds are self-inflicted. I think the challenge for universities now is how do we help people to understand that the research that's done, and not just at MIT and not just at Harvard, but at top research universities all around the country, okay, this research changes our lives and gives us the jobs we need, and that basically we should be, as Simon argued in my book, we should be doubling down on R&D, not retreating.
Hey, Jon, for the final minute that you're here, putting aside what you tell an international well, we shouldn't put it aside. What do you tell an international student who was thinking of coming to MIT, for example, you or one of your fellow department heads, when they're worried about research funding getting cut, and then add to that a non-economic issue? What do you tell them when they worry? We just spoke to Ayanna Pressley, who met twice with Rumeysa Ozturk. What do you tell an international student who's worried that if they ever state a political opinion that upsets Donald Trump, they'll get snatched and shoved into a cell in Louisiana? What do you tell either of those people?
Look, I mean, on the first one, fortunately, the economic research that most of our kids do is pretty low cost. So most of the budget cuts they're talking about, it will lead us to shrink the size of our graduate program, so they'll have a harder time getting in.
I see.
But once they're in, it won't really, in economics, it's in the sciences that it's really going to be devastating.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're telling their students. I think the second issue, Jim, you raise is just so powerful and sad. And, I don't know what to tell students. Obviously, the easy thing to tell students is keep your head down, get your work done. Don't say anything that might get yourself in trouble. But that advice writ large is what happened in Germany. I mean, if you visit Berlin and go to the museums, it is clear that it doesn't take that many ill-meaning leaders and a population that complies to lead to a decline and to lead to disappearance of democracy. And so we need to be able to speak up. But God, I wouldn't want any one of my students to be caught speaking up. So it's what we call the collective action problem. It's like we saw with these law firms. I wish the law firms had all stood up and fought, but I understand why any given law firm didn't want to. Because if you're the one law firm that stands up and fights, you lose all your business to the ones that don't. So this is a standard collective action problem, and honestly, I don't know what to advise students at this point on that.
By the way, if I had a business for one of those large law firms, I'd go to one of the 9 that fought, not one of the 4 that capitulated. John, as always, learned a lot. Thanks so much for your time. Talk to you soon, Jon Gruber.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Boy, it's a tough outlook here.
Well, it's going to get happier in a couple of minutes.
You think so? Well,
no, we're going to have some fun.
We're going to have some fun. That's right.
Okay.
We've been speaking with Jon Gruber, Ford Professor of Economics and Chair of MIT's Department of Economics, instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform and the Affordable Care Act, which is under the gun as well. After a quick break, it is time, backed by popular demand. Yep. Am I the a-hole? This time, a husband is very upset about his wife's disregard for little ears with her incessant swearing. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In the new sitcom Overcompensating, comedian Benito Skinner plays a version of himself as a closeted college student.
At any given point in the closet, there were all these things in my head that I thought, they're going to know. And if I do this, then they're going to know. And it's all going to crumble down and I'm going to have to come out.
I'm Ari Shapiro, turning old wounds into comedy on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Brookmeadow at Cobb Corner, an assisted living community offering wellness, care, and support services, including an on-site exercise physiologist to help seniors stay physically active. More at brookmeadowslr.com. And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a program that showcases the range and beauty of ballet today, featuring works by Mikko Niisanen and Yuri Killian, now through May 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim, Braude and Margery Eagan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Don't worry, we're not going to postpone. That might be a help. But before we start it, do you know whose parents, neither of them were citizens when he was born in the United States in 1971?
Who?
The Secretary of State of the United States of America.
Oh, Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio. Yeah.
So maybe we have to support him?
He's gone. Get rid of him.
Yep.
Okay, that's true, according to a story. Where did I read this? Financial Times? Wherever I read it. Birthright citizenship, Marco Rubio. Last week, as I'm sure you remember, Am I the a-hole had to be put on the back burner thanks to Pope Leo. He's installed, so we're good. Listeners were really upset about this, by the way.
Very.
You called, you texted, you sent us passive-aggressive emails, so we're thrilled to announce that once again, it is time for another round of Am I the A-hole on BPR. This week, the scenario dug up from Reddit. A husband is embarrassed to be out in public with his carelessly cussing, a word I don't think I've ever used in my whole life, swearing, his swear word spewing wench of a wife. That's what he would say. Specifically, he's bothered when his partner uses the S word around some young kids. First, she argues that the word isn't a swear to begin with. Later, she backpedals in the stance, it's not one that they haven't heard already, she says, and that, quote, her husband should, as I say, quote, should care about what she wants more than what others think. Our number is 877-301-8097. Here's the question. Is the husband here being a little bit of an a-hole, bit of a prude, getting burning ears over his wife's modestly swearing language? Or does he have a point? Is the a-hole in the situation the wife for getting too comfortable throwing around swears willy-nilly, particularly around children? I know we'll have a difference of agreement here. Our number is 877-301-8097. Who's the a-hole, Margery Eagan?
The wife. The wife.
And why is that?
Because it's not a good idea to be swearing around your kids all the time. You know why?
No.
Because you're going to be in a situation, as our producer here, Jamie, where your little kid
that's true. This is
goes
true.
off to school. He's still in diapers practically.
Anthony.
That's right. Here he is repeating what his father, Jamie, had been saying a few moments earlier about Jim.
That is an effing idiot. How old was little Anthony then? 2 at the time?
Yeah.
So what harm was done by that? So he obviously heard Jamie using an F-bomb in front of his little kid. Is his growth been stunted? You know what's so weird about this? You are the one who agrees with me that when your kids are growing up, even though they're not allowed to drink till 21, it's probably safer that they start drinking when they're 15 or 16, little sip of wine, etc., so they get used to it. So why shouldn't a little kid get used to the fact that an adult may drop an S-bomb from time to time in their presence like this mother did?
Well, it wasn't just S-bombs.
Yes, it was. That's what he said.
F-bombs.
No, you have no idea.
Yes, she was over the top.
I have it right in front of me.
It was F and this,
it is not
F and that.
No, it's none of that. And by the way,
3.
She also says
they were in preschool.
She also says that she is not that her husband should care more about what she wants, meaning to curse a little bit, than what others think about her cursing. And I am totally with her. So I think the a-hole is the husband for drawing a line on swearing, which is I mean, everybody. Do you not swear?
I didn't swear when my kids were little.
That is totally untrue.
It's true.
Neither did I.
You're
okay, maybe I did.
Full of
you know why I
baloney.
did? Because I want to be my authentic self, Margery.
Yeah.
Unlike you, who chose not to be who you were in front of your children. They knew right away who I was. 877-301-8970 is the question.
And then the kids were swearing. How old were your kids when they started dropping F-bombs?
One, and I have not heard my older daughter, who's 33, swear 10 times in her whole life.
How about your younger daughter?
I've never heard her not swear at her. She unfortunately did pick up a little bit of the lingo a little bit early on, by the way. But do I love her any less? No. I mean, she's totally fine. And that's what people do, Margery. You know why?
Here's one. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to hear the word a-hole, says a texter?
Yes, you are, actually. We've gone through this a million times. Margery occasionally, when she gets like that text like that, morphs into Am I the Jerk? This is not Am I the Jerk segment. It's Am I the a-hole segment.
Okay.
And you have to deal with it.
Okay.
877-301-8970. Let's take some calls.
Janice in Cambridge. What do you think, Janice?
Hello, Janice.
Hi.
Yeah.
Very nice to talk to you both.
You as well.
I am a cursor.
Me too.
And it makes me feel better.
Me too.
I try to temper it around certain people, but sometimes I want to say, will you please get over it? It's just words.
Exactly.
Like you let your kids watch anything on TV or they can see anything online. Violent cartoons. Come on. And I dated a man once, and he said, I don't like the swearing when I said the F word. And I went, well, that's too bad. What are you going to not like next?
Whoa.
I'm not going to be shut down. Thank you.
Excuse this caller. What do you want to say to Janice, Margery? I notice you're silent in the face of Janice, basically slapping it to you right there. How about it?
What age do we start dropping the F-bombs around the kids, Janice? Is it 2? Is it 4? Is it 8? Is it 10?
Okay, yes. I have to admit that my 2-year-old daughter went into a bank. She also had a teenage sister and me, and we were both cursors. And she goes up to this little old lady with white hair. I'm a little old lady myself. Yeah. And I said, F you. And the woman looked at my husband and said, what did she just say to me? And my husband scooped her away and said, I don't know. And then...
So wait a second. What did the old lady do that caused your little the kid there to say what she said? I'm sure.
She was just appalled that this little tiny angelic person, which I think is hilarious when I see it on TikTok or YouTube when people record their little children repeating that. People, we need to get over it.
Janice, you are an amazing woman. How great was it? When you silenced Margery for the whole minute you were on the phone, that proves that she knows you have merit.
Want my children or now my grandchildren to walk into the bank and say F you to the teller. I don't.
It wasn't a teller. It was some old lady there. It wasn't a teller.
Well, it was a person that worked in the bank.
Well, she shouldn't have done whatever she did to merit the little kid from telling her that for herself.
No, I think the question is, do you want your little kids to start swearing it when they're still in diapers? And if you swear in front of them,
how about
that's
what Janice
do.
said? She said to her boyfriend at the time, "What's next that you're going to tell me I shouldn't do?" That's exactly the case with this modestly cursing woman in the thing today.
Okay.
I mean, who is the guy to be telling her what she should say or not say?
Well, I think that's different when you're in a dating relationship. This is about parents swearing in front of their children. Somebody
It is not at all.
They just
It
said,
is
I stopped swearing because I am a parent. And the next person says, grow the F up, Marjorie. That's love, Pat.
Yeah, you stopped swearing when you're a parent, just like Pete Hegseth stopped drinking when he became the Secretary of Defense.
I did. I didn't swear for a long time in front of my kids. Now they're older, so it doesn't matter, but I'm not going to swear in front of my grandchildren.
You're not?
No. Janice from Cambridge. Hi, Janice.
That's too bad. Hi, did we just talk to her?
Oh, we did? Oh, we got. I'm
sorry. Did we talk to you
or
not?
Yeah, we did. I think we did talk to Janice.
Yeah, we did talk to Janice. Let's go to the next one. Janice, yours is an excellent call. 877-301-8970 is our number.
Ken texts, as usual, Jim is the a-hole troll. Keep it classy, Browdy.
You know what that woman just said? Did you hear what she said? They're just words. That's
just
what
words.
she said.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, a lot of things are just words.
Well, that's a good point.
Words hurt, Jim.
Yeah.
Words hurt.
Oh, that's really heavy,
that's
Marjorie.
Right. Stephen in South Yarmouth says, Pope
Sticks
Leo,
and stones, Marjorie.
Sticks and stones will break my bones and words will never hurt me. But other people say it was some nursery rhyme or something.
Oh, yeah.
But words hurt. Pope Leo is the a-hole for making us wait so long to dig into so effing
Not
deep
this week.
a topic.
Let's go to Pam in Newburyport. Welcome to the show, Pam. Hi.
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 So I wanted to say I had my kids young, and I was a swearer in high school.
Yeah.
Really swearing all the time. But when I had my kids, I couldn't control myself, especially when I would drive, because, you drive, you swear.
Amen.
So we had a rule that we could swear only in the car.
Oh.
And I would try not to swear out of the car. But then one day I put my little 2-year-old in the car seat. And as soon as he gets in the car, what does he do now every day? He just starts swearing. And, every word, the S word, the S, everything. Just like all he does. And I was like, I just didn't like to hear it out of his mouth. So what I said to my kids is swearing is like picking your nose. It feels really good when you pick your nose, and it's totally fine. You see somebody else pick your nose, and you're like, ugh, that doesn't feel
Well, I don't
so
think
good.
you want anybody else picking your nose. I mean, that's my bottom line is, Pam, thank you for an excellent image here. Now, here's an anonymous texter.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, I'm tempering my position
This is pretty good.
a drop. My 2-year-old son shocked everyone by saying effing a-hole to his pediatrician after gagging through a throat culture. It may have been his first words.
There you go.
No, okay, but by the way, can I be clear here? You're changing the issue. The issue is not should the woman swear. The issue is should the boyfriend be telling the woman you shouldn't say that? It's not his business. If she chooses to act that way, he accepts her as she is.
Isn't it her husband? And he's swearing in front of the children?
Is it the husband?
He doesn't want her swearing in front of the children, Jim. Unless I read it wrong.
It's his wife. What is he owner? And they're in Dubai. We didn't say that.
They're his children.
All's fair. Whatever happens in Dubai stays in Dubai.
I think a father has something to say about the child rearing.
No, he's not. No, to a degree, and they can say it, and then But would you change your behavior if a partner of yours said, "I don't like the way you dress," for example, Marjorie? I think it's setting a bad example for the children that you wear the same dress every single day. Would you change your dress or say, no, that's my business?
That is extremely
That was
weak
a good example.
Comparison.
It's a really good example.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Okay,
here's Jeff in Andover. He's a
Jeff.
stand-up guy.
What do you say?
Cursing, especially in front of children, is classless and a sign of being stupid.
Sorry.
Unless you're talking about Donald Trump, you're going to let him fly out of your mouth.
That's Jeff.
Somebody else wants to know what's bugging Jim today. He seems
I'm not extra grumpy at all.
Usual.
I'm not grumpier than usual.
Samantha in Dedham, thank you for calling.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi there. I'm the one that called last week about the pink toilet fountain revenge my neighbors.
Indeed. Welcome back.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is the same family. I used to babysit the little boys, and they would swear, and of course I didn't want to laugh. I tried very hard not to laugh.
It's hard.
So I taught them a really good term. I taught them to use the word coprolite instead of poop or whatever, because that is an anthropological term for fossilized poop.
Wow.
So instead of calling someone a nasty name, I'd say, call them a coprolite. And it worked beautifully. I don't know if their mother knew what it meant, but they did and we did, and it was just our little secret. They could use the word coprolite, and it was perfectly acceptable.
Wow, that is an incredibly creative way to go at the problem. Samantha, thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Husband needs to find a new wife, one who respects his feelings. Seriously, it bothers him. Marriage is all about mutual respect. Tone it down in public, lady.
That is really condescending and sexist, by the way. Tone it down, lady? Is that what and you're okay with that?
I don't view it as a mortal sin when someone uses the word lady. It's okay, Jim.
Oh, yeah, well, you should, Marty. By the way,
Okay.
do you like applesauce?
No.
I have an extra applesauce. I realized I brought two by mistake.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Okay, you don't want the applesauce?
I don't want any applesauce.
Okay,
no,
fine.
go right ahead.
Okay, I'll
go
leave it.
crazy.
I'll leave it.
Margot in New Hampshire. What do you think, Margot?
Yeah. Wait, Margot, before you talk, Aaron in Auburn says, Jim is often wrong, but I've never heard him be this wrrong. That's beautiful, Aaron.
What do
I'm
you
sorry,
think, Margot?
Margot. Go ahead.
That's okay, and I think you're 100% right.
Thank you.
So,
why?
So it's because all right. So I swear, and I've always sworn in front of my kids. Not, a normal amount, I guess.
Normal, yeah.
And it's just words. It's just words, and I think it's an opportunity to say to them, you know what, this is okay when we're alone or we're hanging out at home or whatever. It's not okay to say these things at school, or it's not okay to say these things in front of grandma and grandpa. And it was a learning opportunity. And now, I think if you're even average intelligence, you can certainly figure out when it's appropriate to swear or not.
That was excellent.
Okay, so Margot, if they're just...
Well, go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead, Margot.
No, if they're just words, why is it not okay to swear in front of grandma and grandpa or at school if they're just words?
Well, I think you're being respectful to the rules at school.
Exactly.
Respectful, but it's, that's when they're children. When I still swear. And, if I'm offending somebody, I might say I'm sorry, or I might not. I've said to many people, it's just a word.
Well, not only that, what Margot, you're saying that is brilliant, that Marjorie is choosing to ignore, it's a learning experience. You say to your kids, it's okay to say it here. It's not okay to say it to your teacher or the bank teller or your grandmother or whatever. And so
but
you
I guess
establish
the question
rules.
is, if it's fine to swear, then why isn't it fine to swear
Because it's not
everywhere?
fine with everybody. And so what Margot is saying, in certain settings, correct me if I'm wrong, Margot, it's fine, but you teach your kids that in other settings it's not fine. That's what you're saying, right?
I am saying that, but also the guy is an a-hole. I'm sorry. But, the bottom line for me is it's not his business.
Amen.
I don't care if he's my husband. They're my kids, too. Get over it. Mom swears a little bit. For Pete's sake.
Margot, you're great. That was fabulous. That was so on point that Marjorie once again was speechless. Thank you. It's interesting. Whenever somebody
I'm
comes
reading
to a
the
different
text.
position, you can't even say anything because they're so
did.
well thought out.
Jim, I asked her if they're just
I know,
words.
but I wasn't listening to that part of it. I was listening to the beginning and the end.
Okay.
I was.
Here's Donna on the
doing
road.
something else.
I was in the
Eating
grocery store.
applesauce.
I was in the grocery store the
Love
other day,
applesauce.
and one of the workers who was stocking the shelves was talking to one of his coworkers and dropping the F word.
Yeah.
I was feeling disrespected because he was also very loud. But then I realized he was talking about the Trump administration. I thought, well, that's okay then.
Excuse me,
But
why
I
is it
think
okay that you curse in front of me and our coworkers? And
because you are an adult. You're not one of my children. And by the way, you were the one that was always talking about how shocked you were when you were at the Cambridge Side Gallery on the escalator, and you were going down the escalator with your little
this is a
girls.
good story. I'll tell this
and
story.
you,
Okay,
the
you
other
tell.
people were coming up the escalator, and it bothered you what they were
here's
doing,
what happened.
didn't it?
My kids were young single digits. I think they were like 3 and 5.
Mhm.
And I took them to the Galleria, which I often did, even though it was often a shooting gallery in those days. And there were a couple of teenagers who were dropping a million F-bombs. And so I politely turned to the teenagers and I said to them, excuse me, guys, little kids, would you mind just holding it down for a second? And they both turned to me and in perfect synchrony say, F you. So that didn't work very well.
No, but why were you concerned about that? Because you feel it's okay to swear in front of your little tyke children?
No, actually, it wasn't. There was a grandmother further down the escalator who was offended. My kids were rooting them on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we play a little bit from this viral song?
I never heard this before.
I
What
never
is
heard of
this?
this. We're taking a chance here.
What
but
is it?
here's sound of a viral song written by 12-year-old McKay Hatch for his No Cussing Club. This was written in 2009.
I was sitting in the park, talking to my friends when we heard adults cussing. Man, it never ends. I said, I know I'm just a kid, but I'll challenge you too. They said, hey, we're really sorry. Can we hang with you? If you wanna hang with us, I don't wanna hear you cuss. If you wanna hang with us, I don't wanna hear you cuss. Don't cuss. Don't cuss. If you wanna be my peer, please protect my ears. Don't cuss.
Sort of cute in a perverse sort of way.
Cute. And if these words don't really matter, why can't we say them on the radio?
By the way, it is. Excuse me. If we had a cable television show, you know you can say them, and if you have a broadcast television show, you might get sued by the feds. I mean, is that ridiculous?
That's right.
And by the way, let me, in a moment of seriousness, let's forget kids for a second. But since you just brought up what you brought up, shouldn't we be able to speak on the air exactly like we speak in the world? Authenticity is why we are moderately successful here. Would you not agree?
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. But it's kind of like it's become like the F word has become an adjective.
Exactly. It is an adjective.
It's effing sunny out.
Exactly.
It's not effing sunny out. I mean, it's kind of like a little much.
Not at all. It's just not at all. I mean, you're taking a position that's, with all due respect, is not very well thought out.
Oh, here's a good one.
What is it?
From Lorraine, New Hampshire. It's just words. This is from the guy who loses it over the use of less versus fewer.
By the way, that really aggravates me. I heard it on a newscast, not on our station, another newscast this morning. I felt like crawling through the radio. Do you not consider someone to be really ill-informed if they don't know the difference between less and fewer? I mean, really.
I think an awful lot of people don't know the difference between less and fewer. That would bother me less than if every other word was F this, F that.
Well, if it's every other word, what you can do, you can change a station.
Okay.
Or not hang out with them, but people should be who they are.
Okay.
That's my motto.
Right.
It's always been my motto.
Paul from Fort Lauderdale says, my nephew at 2 was in his high chair, slamming his fist on the table, saying, can we say this word on the radio?
Can we say this word, John?
The B word for a woman.
Yeah.
The B word for woman over and over to his mother
sister.
and his sister. And I said, well...
This is horrible. I can't believe you read this
so well already.
That is really low rent on your part. Okay.
John is by the dump button, just in case.
But I think they know what we're talking about. Now, how weird do you feel that you couldn't say those words? How do you feel when Donald Trump drops, and has he dropped F-bombs publicly? But I know he said other curse words, and the newspapers don't run the words. The guy said it. I mean, he said it. Why shouldn't we know it? Hello?
It's too much.
It's not too much.
It is too much.
You're like a prude.
And it's too much if it's constant. You know, sometimes you hear people talking, every other word is F this, F that, F the other thing. It's a little bit, can't you expand your vocabulary a little bit and use other, perhaps more descriptive words?
You know what you can use? You can use less words. How about that? That was a joke for those who are tending to grammar.
It should be fewer words.
Benjamin,
I agree with Marjorie. My husband
Benjamin.
and I gave up swearing when our son was growing up. There is no emotional need for a person to swear. Peg from Hope.
Okay, and last time you were in physical pain, I assume you dropped an F-bomb.
That's different.
How great did that feel?
You know what?
Does that alleviate the pain, or does that alleviate the pain?
There actually have been studies that if you swear when you stub your toe or you
How about
burn
the pain
yourself,
of life, not just the pain of physical? How about the pain of life? How painful is life these days?
I don't think it's 27 F words when you drive 2 blocks down the street.
Well, we have a difference of opinion. Benjamin in Providence, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. Hi.
How are you guys? Old white guy from Providence, double standard. She's the a-hole. Women swearing. When my wife swears, it upsets me, and it's kind of like same thing for being drunk. Drunk women are sloppy, and if they spit on the sidewalk, that's nasty too. And
how about drunk men who spit on the sidewalk? Hey, how about drunk men, Benjamin?
Jim, mayonnaise on cheeseburgers, buddy. Sorry.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Benjamin, excellent
You're
call,
right about
I
that
think.
part anyway.
Thank you.
But I think there is a lot of sexism involved.
What?
There is a lot of sexism involved with swearing.
No, there's sexism by you, because I'm fine with this woman swearing in front of the young kids, because she doesn't do it often. We know that. Margery, by the way, I want to be clear. Margery totally made up what she said at the beginning, that the woman was dropping F-bombs in front of the kids. There's nowhere in the story is there that. She said the word SH blank blank. That is the word she said, and she originally said it's not even a swear word. I would almost agree.
Yep.
Would you? Does that word trouble you too?
Well, it doesn't trouble me because I use those words, but I'm just you
would never say the word in front of your children.
Yeah,
I'm not messing up the story. You made up facts.
You have to add said mother after you say it.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, let's go to Carol in Worcester. Carol, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey.
Oh, hi. I can't believe I got through.
Nor can I. Go ahead.
First time I've tried to get through.
You better be good. Go ahead.
It better be good. I'll tell you, it's a little ironic that you're using the term a-hole and talking about swearing.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Didn't occur to either of us. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've been known to use it when I drop something on my toe. But when my kids were little, if somebody were driving like an idiot on the road, I would call them a turkey. So my kids grew up thinking turkey was a bad word. In the meantime, I find it lazy when it comes to using swear words. It's lazy. It's disrespectful to the language. And you go into a coffee shop, you see girls, boys using the F-bomb constantly. If they're not saying he says. And then I said to him, they're saying, they're dropping the effing this and effing that and effing. And enough is enough. Show some respect for yourself. Show some respect for language.
You're speaking, Margery.
Say.
Yeah. Hey, Carol, the connection's getting bad. Thank you much for the call. One of our coworkers made a being celebrated. Joe Biden leaned over to the President of the United States after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, and what did he say?
So it was a big effing deal.
He did. It was picked up on the microphone. Was that okay?
Well, again, he was speaking
My
to...
My little kid heard that.
It was Vice President...
She hasn't gotten health care since. As a result of it, she was so put off. She said, I'm not even applying for health care, or COBRA for that matter, when I lose my job, because I'm so appalled by what Joe Biden had to say.
It was a Vice President to the President, different than, in front of your 3-year-old kid. And that's the issue here. The children, Jim. It's all about the children.
Now, we've known Jared forever, basically, give or take a couple of years. And I'm embarrassed to say because it rolls off my whatever. So I can't even say if he uses an occasional F-bomb or whatever. Do you or don't you? Do you?
Yeah.
Does Margery know?
I think you do.
Do you? You don't?
I don't think too often. I think you use the appropriate word at the appropriate moment.
Yeah. Well, because we have martinis sometimes, so
That's right.
It rolls out a little bit more with the martini.
It rolls out a little bit more when you have a couple of cocktails.
But I
that
try
is true.
not to because my
Why?
dad hates swearing so much. So even though I no longer live with my parents and haven't for a long time, I still feel like he's listening.
Okay. So Aiden just typed us a note. I didn't remember this. Jared didn't want it to be called Am I the A-hole? You want it to be jerk? Is that true?
Yeah, when I was filling in, I wouldn't say
that is, oh my God.
It's because of my dad, I swear, yeah.
Was he listening to the show?
No, but...
Okay.
So you certainly wouldn't say it in front of the children.
I would not say it in front of the children.
Of course
Margery,
not.
you never... I was trying to think of this the entire time you've been talking. I don't think I've ever heard you swear.
Well, I don't swear on the air.
Well,
let me tell you something.
See you off.
She's got a mouth on her. Let me just... She does.
You say that
she
even
does
for
on
me.
the air, but
Okay.
she can really drop them. She can.
Are you kidding? You are the biggest swearer I know.
I wasn't saying I wasn't.
Yeah,
you know why? Because
he's
again,
a million times
I'm going
worse than I
to
am.
tee you up next time because I want to hear this.
Tee me up.
No,
That's
she can
right.
really do it. I'm telling you, she can really drop a few.
Okay.
No, you can. And look,
Okay.
she's not making.
To get
When
really
Margery doesn't make
colorful.
eye contact, that is proof.
That's right.
That I've nailed the issue. Is that true?
He's lying.
I'm not lying.
He is.
Okay.
He is.
Okay. So,
find
what are you
out.
doing on your thing there? Show.
We're talking to Allison.
Can I just read this headline in the Boston Globe? Former Harvard President Claudine Gay's base salary was 30% less than her predecessor. Is that unbelievable?
Than her predecessor.
First woman president?
Well, I mean...
First second woman president, first black woman president. 30% less.
But does that
That was less
compare?
than Drew
I think
Faust.
What? I just said Faust was.
But does that compare with Drew Faust's first year?
I don't know. We'll check. We'll check it out. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because they do grow into the salary.
Okay.
They do. That's true.
We're speaking with Alison Bechdel. She is the graphic novelist and memoirist whose work, of course, became Fun Home, the musical. So she has a new novel called Spent, which is hilarious. It's all about her living. It's based on a character called Alison Bechdel, who is a cartoonist living in Vermont and dealing with a lot of issues on her pygmy goat farm.
By the way, her predecessor, Jamie just pointed out, speaking of Bechdel, was Bacow, not
Bacow.
Faust.
You're right.
Larry
That's right.
Bacow was
Sorry
her
about
predecessor.
that. Yep. Okay.
We'll read the story we'll talk about tomorrow. Go ahead.
And then we'll preview the Boston Public Quartet's upcoming concert at the Strand Theater, where they're presenting all works by women. And then we'll meet Kayla Tabb, the Boston Public Library's chef in residence. How cool
I
is
read
that?
about her the other. I'm dying to hear
fun?
that. That's
Me too.
great.
I'm dying to talk to her about this.
She in the Roxbury. Where's she located?
She's located in Roxbury. Yeah,
that's a great
Super
thing
cool.
they're doing. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, Jared.
All right, Marjorie, we have to have a date. So
we
I
have to have a date.
Goad you into swearing.
I'm in a different league than Mr. Brown.
Let me tell you, you're in AAA, ready to graduate to the majors any day.
Thank you very much,
See ya.
Jared. And thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Keep up with us 24/7. We have a podcast where you can check out our TikTok page, Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow we are back live at the Boston Public Library. Virginia's Carbon Leaf is our act for this week's Live Music Friday. They're a great indie rock group supporting their 15th album release. Also joining us, Axios business reporter Dan Premack is going to talk about the economy under Trump. Painter Armani Thompson, Gene Tempest, and Cameo George behind a New American Experience documentary about the invention of the Polaroid
Can I just
camera.
say, I watched it last
great.
night. It is fabulous.
It is great. And retired federal
Fabulous.
judge Nancy Gertner is going to help us out in all these legal issues involving the Trump administration. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jane Bologna, Patrick Lally for running today's stream. The Culture Show with Jared Bowen comes on right after us. Here on 89.7 GBH, I'm Margery Eagan.
I mean to say you made a big mistake on the
did?
applesauce. No, you did. It's it's fabulous.
I tell you.
Well, it is. It's good. It's really good and refreshing.
Like a big spoonful of applesauce to really make your day.
It's actually quite good. I am Jim Braude. We'll see you tomorrow at the library.
Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.
Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, committed to helping customers lower their environmental impact, offering all-electric heat pump systems from Mitsubishi Electric. RevisionEnergy.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at